Okay, thank you. Now, before I start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. First of all, there are no planned fire alarm tests this evening. If you do hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit. Security staff will be available to direct you. Please, can you also switch off your mobile phones or move them to silent? Thank you for your cooperation on this. Before we go on, I just want to make a brief statement, if I can. I'd like to make a short statement regarding the Ledbury estate. On the 21st of August this year, the group opposition made a formal request that I hold an extraordinary full council assembly meeting on matters regarding the Ledbury estate. I took some advice from the constitutional team on the legality of the request, which was fine. I wanted to have an early meeting and concluded the best way forward was to refer the matter to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that was meeting on the 11th of September. I contacted the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny and he agreed to include the Ledbury estate issue on the agenda. I spoke to a number of the residents from the estate and they were happy to go down this route. I did attend the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 11th of September and I sat with a number of the residents to give them some moral support. I was pleased to hear that evening that the Senior Housing Officer and the Cabinet Member for Housing gave a number of commitments that hopefully allayed some of the residents' concerns. The decision to ask Overview and Scrutiny to look at this was mine alone. There was no closing of ranks, nobody tried to put any pressure on me to hold up or delay proceedings, and I was happy that from being asked to call a meeting till the evening of OSC took only 3 weeks, whereas to arrange a full council assembly may have taken longer to arrange, especially as the conference season was about to begin. Since then, I have kept an eye open on the events on the estate and have been amazed how quickly the council have reacted to some of the repairing issues. New boilers and rewiring have been installed in double quick time, and this is a credit to the officers involved and the Cabinet Member for Housing. I know this has been a difficult time for all the residents living on the estate, and I wish to wish them well for the future. Thank you. Now, Councillor Peter John, the Leader of the Council, would like to make an announcement.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And the announcement has been circulated to members on white paper and concerns the Strategic Director of Housing and Modernisation. Everything that I want to say is in that written statement, but can I just add a few words? Jerry Scott, who will be leaving us at Christmas as Director of Housing and Modernisation, has been a truly exemplary public servant to this council over the last 7 years. When she joined us, there wasn't a housing department in Southwark, and she went about the task of recreating a department to oversee our 55,000 properties. It's not an easy job being housing director in Southwark, and in some ways it's unusual for a council leader to be getting up and paying tribute to an outgoing housing director. Sometimes they just kind of disappear in the past under administrations of different colours. But Jerry put together the housing department, has dealt with the challenges of that position over the last 7 years brilliantly, and has become a trusted and integral member of our council's management team. I think it's the absolutely honest way in which she deals with problems which has earned her the admiration of councillor colleagues right across this chamber over that 7 years. She will always take on any issue and look into it, and she will always give you an early and clear and honest reply. You mentioned the Ledbury estate. I think Jerry's leadership of this council's response to the difficulties at the Ledbury estate has been exemplary and has set, I think, an absolute standard as to how we as a council should respond to those kinds of issues in the future. So trusted has Jerry been in the last 7 years that she's taken on responsibility in more recent years for modernisation of this council and has driven through some really significant changes again and delivered. I think any job that you give to Jerry or the Chief Executive gives to Jerry, she delivers on. And I know that she will be very, very deeply missed. She's been methodical, effective, reliable, good-humoured, and she leaves with our love and respect. I'm also very pleased to announce that Michael Scorer, who is currently the Director of Housing Services at Hackney, will be joining us next February as Jerry's replacement. Michael also has had an extensive and exemplary career in local government and public service, and I'm very pleased to say he was the unanimous choice of our appointments committee when we met a couple of weeks ago. So I'm sure that we wish Michael well and will welcome him very warmly when he joins us in February. So we welcome Michael, we say farewell to Jerry. There'll be other opportunities, I'm sure, for individuals to say goodbye to Jerry, but I wanted to record at Council Assembly my gratitude and thanks to her.
Thank you, Councillor John. I have received apologies for absence from Councillors Evelyn Akoto, Paul Fleming, Lucas Green, Anne Kirby, Vijay Luthra and James Ockerson. Are there any more apologies? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also have apologies for lateness from Councillor Cleo Soames and Councillor Vicky Mills.
Thank you very much. Yesterday I met with the group whips to consider the format of this evening's meeting. This is set out in the programme motion which has been tabled this evening. The motion explains how this evening's business will be conducted, and now the meeting now needs to vote upon this motion. Can we all agree the programme motion? Thank you. Now that members have agreed the programme motion, I shall be moving the meeting on accordingly, and members are asked to keep to the agreed timings. I mean that. Thank you. Right, the clerk will now explain what papers have been circulated to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Council Assembly. The following papers have been circulated for the ordinary meeting. The open supplemental agendas 1 and 2, which contain petitions, public questions, community evidence, deputation requests and updated motion 8, and also amendments. We also have the following papers which have been circulated around the chamber this evening. Members' questions and responses, late question and response, public question and responses, the programme motion, and the announcement from the leader. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do any members wish to make any declaration of interest? Now, when making your declaration, can you please specify it if it is a disclosable pecuniary interest, and please state the nature of the interest. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in motion 3, the local government pay cap, as I work for Unison, Britain's biggest public service trade union.
Okay. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in motion 3, local government pay cap. My organisation aligns itself with the NJC pay scales.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to declare disclosable pecuniary interest for Councillor Vicky Mills in motion 3, the local government pay cap.
Any others? Thank you. Oh, there's another one. Councillor.
I have a disposable interest for item 3. I work for London Borough of Hackney by day.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest in item 3 as I work for London Borough of Richmond upon Thames.
Okay. Anyone else? No? That's it. Then we'll move on. Thank you. Can we approve the minutes of the meeting of Council Assembly that was held on the 12th of July 2017 as a correct record? Agreed? The minutes have been updated to reflect that Councillor Smith, myself, chaired the meeting and not that of Councillor Witham. Don't actually got in on the act, but there we go. Right, so as part of the programme motion, it was agreed that the meeting should finish at 10 p.m. All happy with that? Good. Right. Now there is one petition this evening, excuse me, and can the officers please bring forward the petitioner? Hello. Okay. Welcome to you all. Just to let you know that you have 5 minutes to speak. So there we are. Carry on.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing us to present this petition, which is concerned with the adverse impact on the local environment and the local business, the Umana Yana Guyanese Cafe, caused by the installation of 5 telecom boxes on a small area of pavement outside 294 Croxted Road, Herne Hill. My name is David Taylor. I'm on the planning group of the Herne Hill Society, and I'll be setting out the background. Also here on my left is Sophie Mason, who's taken the lead on the petition, and Debbie Monfries, who owns the Umana Yana. Since 2007, 4 applications for telecoms boxes have been submitted by mobile phone operators, and 4 times the council refused them on grounds of adverse environmental impact, and 1 appeals on 3 of them. On the 4th occasion, the council refused the application, but failed to inform the applicant in time, and it was therefore deemed to have consent. As in such cases, a decision has to be notified to the applicant within 56 days. The decision was made by officers on the 55th day, but the applicant claimed the decision did not reach them in time. This was not challenged by the council and the box was installed. I submitted a stage 1 complaint on behalf of the society, and following what we felt was an unsatisfactory response, considered a stage 2 complaint. However, subsequent national legislation relating to permitted developments meant that larger boxes could be installed without the need for the prior approval. A more recent box, erected in 2016, was felt to be over the permitted size, and I met an enforcement officer on site with Councillor Mitchell, one of the ward councillors. We measured it, and it was 0.04 cubic metres under the allowable limit. It's about the size of a small matchbox, but only if the plinth was excluded. A new investigation was promised in an email of November the 7th, 2016 from an officer, but we've heard nothing since. We do recognise the limits of the Council's enforcement and planning powers and appreciate the financial constraints on the Council, but would point out that this is public highway and we've never received advice which was requested about the possible use of highway powers as promised a year ago. There are also safety issues for cyclists and cars exiting the nearby Arches access road because of the poor sightlines caused by the boxes. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, it is a matter of strong local concern, and of course to Debbie and her business. A concerned customer, Sophie Mason, decided to help Debbie by drawing up a petition.
Thank you. So we are here to really kind of appeal for your urgent support. Umana Yana is a wonderful takeaway with absolutely mesmerising food, and you really should try it. I am a regular customer of Debbie's, and when I heard her story, I just had to help her. The telecoms boxes are completely destroying Debbie's business. You can see from these images, they totally obscure the view from the takeaway, so you can't see it, you can't tell whether it's open at all. Unfortunately, business revenue has fallen by 75% since the boxes were installed. So this takeaway will be forced to close very soon unless we act now. Debbie has put her heart and soul into the restaurant. She's invested heavily, and if she loses it, she and her children will be homeless. I set up the petition because I desperately wanted to help Debbie and I wanted to get the local community behind us. Over 2,000 people have supported our campaign, including our MP Helen Haynes, and I believe she's written to you expressing her thoughts on this. We've also had support from the local media with Southwark News featuring our campaign. We've had some wonderful comments from people in the community saying, amazing rotis, lovely owner, support local business, they're ruining this great business by taking away this family's livelihood. Southwark Council should be supporting local business and not obscuring them with these ugly boxes. Have some common sense, council officials. In a recent FOI request, the council said it is recognised that by putting the number of cabinets there, they have, and in one location, mobile phone operators have caused a problem. The council is therefore taking advice to see what steps are available to tackle this issue. So,
you have 30 seconds left. Okay.
Can you tell us what you're doing to tackle this issue, and would you consider one of these options? Would you reimburse Yana for loss of earnings? Do you have the powers under the highways legislation to enforce removal of some of these cabinets? Would you consider imposing an Article 4 direction on the site to prevent any further boxes? Could you work with the mobile phone operators to find less environmentally damaging locations? It's clear we have the support from the community and they are behind our campaign, but will you give Debbie the support that she so desperately needs?
Thank you very much now. Thank you. Right. We now have 10 minutes for debate. Thank you. I understand that Councillor Mitchell would like to say something, and then I think Councillor Schimmel, yes? Who else? Yes? Yes? Yeah. I'll get my colleague to write all these down. So we'll start off with Councillor Mitchell.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Can I congratulate the petitioners on securing this debate? And may I also declare a non-pecuniary interest, but as a Croxted Road resident, I walk past the shop every day I go to work. So I am familiar as a local resident, but as David also said, as the local councillor, I have taken up these matters with the council. I convened the meeting that we had with the officers where we did this detailed measuring exercise, and that officer at the time brought all these Google map of the images showing how it started with just one and then it built up and up and up. And I've also taken other council officers when we've been visiting other sites to say, do you realise we've got this issue as well? And I have to say that they have voluntarily said, oh yes, we know Debbie's roti shop, it's excellent, we go and actually buy our food there ourselves. So it is known wider than just the planning department. I mean, I share the disappointments of the petitioners with the response that the council has been able to give so far. But it is my view that the steady addition of these boxes has changed the environment and the feel of the area so radically that there should be some planning or amenity grounds that we can deploy. And I think that the avenues that Sophie has described are ones down which we should be looking to go. And therefore I hope that as we're invited to pick one of the three options in paragraph 4, that we do commission further investigations into this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Schimmel, do you want to speak to this?
I misunderstood the procedure. I just had a quick question, actually. I don't know if that's okay to ask the petitioners. Okay, so my question was just that I wondered whether you, with the Herne Hill Society or the council officers that you've been dealing with on your behalf, have made contact with the operator who put the box there to see whether they would be willing to move it.
I'm not aware that they did. I mean, I've certainly spoken to at least 3 enforcement officers over the years, and they have said what Councillor Mitchell has said, but I'm not aware they've spoken to them directly. They may well have done, but I'm not aware of it.
I've actually spoken to people installing the boxes, and they have said that it would be very expensive to move the boxes, and then we would not have a chance in hell getting them moved. So they've been very uncooperative. So.
Thank you for that. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the deputation for coming. I'm the cabinet member responsible for the planning department in Southwark. I wasn't aware of this case, but I can certainly agree with everything that Councillor Mitchell has said, and also completely sympathise with the position that you've found yourself in as a local business, struggling and the impact that there's been to your takings. In response to the question in the petition about whether we would consider an Article 4 direction to remove the permitted development rights, and I'd say not just for this location, but I'd say all locations across the borough, so that this unfortunate circumstance doesn't happen to anybody else, and there can be some learning from this case, is that I will certainly go away and talk to my planning officers to see if it's possible to bring an Article 4 direction in to remove the permitted development rights for these mobile phone boxes. As you mentioned, there is national legislation around this which does tie our hands now, unfortunately, and we do need that national change, so it's good to hear that Helen Hayes, the local MP, is involved, but I'll take that away. I'll get your contact details and I'll follow up in writing, and hopefully we can take that through.
Thank you for that. If there's no one else who wants to make a contribution, I beg your pardon, Mr. Ian Wingfield, Councillor.
Doctor, actually. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I would like to do is basically say that as the Cabinet Member for Environment, I'd like to thank you for coming here this evening. I also think you've made some very telling points, not just about the way the Council operates, but about this particular issue specific to this premises, but also the generic nature of it. I think David's points about permitted development is, obviously that's the law, there's nothing we can deal with that directly. However, Lambeth is the Highways Authority, Southwark isn't the Highways Authority. On our borders, we tend to share it with neighbouring borders, so in the north, on one side it's Lewisham, and the south it's Southwark, and then vice versa on the Lambeth side. So we would have to liaise with our Lambeth colleagues in relation to this. However, what I would also like to say is that because of the urgency, because of the effect on your business, I think what I would like to suggest to you is that you come in and meet me and perhaps Councillor Williams, if not some of the other councillors, to go through the various alternatives that you put forward. I think we need to drill down on those a bit more and flesh them out and see which ones are possible and practical. Can I also say that we've written to Virgin directly about this matter. We haven't received a response, and we've sent a chaser in relation to it. And I think that there is a more general issue in relation to other sites, not just obviously in Southwark, and not just in London, but all over the country. So I'm quite happy to write to government ministers directly to seek a change in national legislation that will ensure that circumstances like this will never happen again. So if you're willing to meet, we're willing to chat it over with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Can I thank the delegation for coming tonight and ask one of the officers to escort you to the back. If you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, it's entirely up to you. I can fully understand if you don't, but there we are. Now we have the first public questionnaire. Can I invite Amir Eden to ask a supplementary question to Councillor Mark Williams, who's the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and New Homes. Is that right? Yeah.
So we strongly support the delivery of the school and are delighted that the Council has strengthened its resolve in ensuring that the new developments are policy compliant with regards to affordable housing. We note that the absence of affordable housing is the issue and the point of discussion between the Council and the GLA.
Is this a question, Mr.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It is the Council's ambition to see affordable housing on or off site and to ensure the housing is generally affordable at a level such as council rent or a level affordable for key workers. We're willing to support the Council to conclude the matter through practical support where feasible, and are happy to discuss this further.
Who's going to answer this?
Thank you very much for that further question, Amir. So as you say, the Council is absolutely committed to getting this school built. We need the places. The school applicant are absolutely fantastic, and we've had a number of emails in the last 2 weeks from parents of prospective students for that school. As I say in the public answer, we're committed to doing everything we can to get this to Planning Committee in January with a recommendation for approval. There is the issue of affordable housing, which we're currently discussing with the GLA. We are pushing them absolutely as hard as we can to get this issue resolved and to get the school consented rather, in January. The exact form the affordable housing will take, we're still negotiating with the GLA. It'll probably be a payment of some kind, but we are working that through. But we desperately want to get this school consented, get it built, get the students there, and make sure we've got great quality education for local young people.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eden. As I say, if you'd like to stay for the rest of the meeting, you can if you like. The second public questionnaire is Nick Grenside, and he wants to ask a supplementary question to Councillor Peter John. Is Mr. Grenside here? No, therefore we shall move on to the next business. I would like to thank the public questionnaire. No, we've done that one already, so here we are, sorry. I invite Toby O'Connor to ask a supplementary question of Councillor Mark Williams. Is Toby O'Connor here? Well done, sir. If you come to the front. Thank you very much.
Hello. While taking full account of the MPPF is commendable, I feel like the question hasn't really been answered. The assertion that certain contexts of place and policy can afford equal or better protection through other means than the traditional progressive method, depending on your viewpoint, of a borough-wide local list is noted. However, 2 points arise. Firstly, as acknowledged, the alternative means have no applications in various situations and settings throughout the borough. And the reliance on neighbourhood fora to fill some of these gaps soon seems optimistic given the speed of progress of recent neighbourhood plans. Secondly, the answer does not explain any disadvantages of adopting a borough-wide local list that could be complementary to the other stated means. Can I expand slightly? On the benefit of a local...
Are you going to ask a question?
Yeah.
Good. Well, if you could do that.
Okay. So, local lists, as adopted by other boroughs, can, through meaningful engagement, attend well to what places are and will be, not just what they were. They can be a vital tool of sustainable planning and binding places together. In the guidance-less cracks identified in the answer, the fringes of area action plans, SPDs, the edges of conservation area appraisals, and in contested boundaries of neighbourhood areas, for example, as well as in more peripheral and unheard places.
The question is what?
Will the Council commit to giving proper treatment of emerging local lists in line, for example, with Historic England's guidance on the subject, if indeed you're not going to make one of your own? So the first question was, what are the disadvantages to a local list? If there is absolutely no chance of you doing a borough-wide local list, will you attend according to guidance like Historic England's, which I can give an example of why, with any emerging local lists that come from neighbourhood fora that you've proposed should fill those gaps?
Thank you for the question. We have given consideration to introducing a borough-wide local list in the past, but as you may be aware or may not be aware, having a local list doesn't actually give any greater level of protection to those buildings or structures than they would otherwise have. And through recognising them through our area action plans, through emerging neighbourhood plans and through supplementary planning documents and conservation area appraisals, we think that's the best way of identifying these buildings and giving them weight in the planning process and the planning system to give them the protection that's needed, rather than producing a local list, putting the resource into that which wouldn't actually give them any greater level of protection. With the emerging neighbourhood plans, of which from memory I think we've got 8 or 9 now in the borough, we very much look forward to their ideas coming forward so that they can be given some status as well. And the other thing that we've mentioned in the answer is that where we need to be fleet of foot to protect buildings, and the one that springs to mind is the Glad Public House in Borough. We moved, when that premises was threatened, we moved very, very quickly to actually designate that as a conservation area, the old Liberty of the Mint, to save that building and stop it being demolished. And if it had just been on a local list, that wouldn't have had the same weight. So where we need to be, we are fleet of foot to make sure that our historic buildings and structures are protected. The specific you mentioned about Historic England and the guidance there coming out of a local list done through them, I haven't heard of that before, so I'm more than willing to meet with you to talk about that in more detail and see if that's something that we can follow up on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Can I ask the officer to escort you to the rear of the building? Thank you very much. I can't hear you, and even if I could, I wouldn't even respond, but we're going to get on. This evening's theme debate is on the subject of culture and well-being. We shall now consider the first community evidence submission on the theme from Vital Old Kent Road. Can officers please bring forward the group's representatives? Thank you, sir. Thank you for attending this evening. You have 5 minutes to address the Assembly.
Thank you. Mark Brearley from Old Kent Road Business, KMET. Here with me tonight, John Hines, Sandra Pursoud, Lewis Chaplin, 4 of us from amongst 300 members of the Vital OKR Association that's giving voice to the economy of our locality, an economy that provides livelihoods to around 10,000 people, a high proportion local. Please be aware that the Council's emerging plans are a threat to the jobs and well-being of many people in the Old Kent Road area, a challenge to its entrepreneurial culture. You are invited to reach out to us and learn more. We hope you will strengthen demands for further evolution of the plans away from its savage starting point. Our area's industrial economy, employing some 4,500 people, is most threatened. The base assumption was most could be swept aside. There have been signs of a change of approach of late. We strongly encourage more of that. Courier and delivery depots, hirers, repairers, ice cream vans, 57 construction-related businesses, 24 builders merchants, culture-related logistics and production, 16 volume printers, art and artisan production, hat makers, painters, sculptors, printmakers, carvers, leather workers, jewellers, cabinet makers, upholsterers, a dairy, butchers, fishmongers, commercial caterers and bakeries, breweries, 80 manufacturing businesses including tin can makers, bespoke fabricators, joiners and metal workers, polishers, platers and coaters, tray makers. That's my business. Most want to stay and intend to grow. Similar businesses would come to the area if there was room. This is not a residual or shrinking economy, the reverse. It should not be brushed aside and forced to constrict, but it is threatened by your plans. Throughout the process towards the Old Kent Road AAP, there has been inadequate dialogue, scarce information, 2 years since the most recent open meeting for businesses. The only options explored at the options stage were ones that would decimate the economy. Detailed plans are being formed for parts of our area. In the OKR 14 area that includes Barclays Malt Street site, dozens of meetings between developers, consultants and Southwark We hear of meetings with all designers involved with schemes, a model of all emerging schemes prepared, 3 consultant teams employed by Southwark. Yet businesses and smaller landowners have been told little, shown nothing, not much sign of Southwark Council people talking to us. Similar thin dialogue applies across the Old Kent Road area. Please, we want the conversation to commence properly. Most businesses support change in the area, understand that much must be achieved, but we need new developments to incorporate extensive, suitable space for the area's growing economy. Development that delivers, as well as housing, all that other space is possible. You, the local authority, needs to take that task seriously. Be bold, innovative and progressive. Battle hard for the objective of a truly mixed piece of city. Seize the remarkable opportunity. We sketched out a set of 20 requests to the council, just a dozen to try on you now. A fuller consultation on the future of the Old Kent Road area, please, and of the key parts of the area, commencing urgently, with a published timetable for detailed and structured dialogue. A public commitment from officers and cabinet members to a series of area visits and on-site meetings that include a full range of businesses and others who are potentially affected. Activate the business network that was promised 8 months ago as a way to open up more systematic communication. Agree to push hard for creation of extensive new space for job-generating industrial and high street enterprises, weaving that in with new developments, including the council's own. 2 more requests. Enable public discussion of options for each of the key chunks of the area with
Your time's up now, sir. Sorry about that. Now, would you like to ask a question to the relevant cabinet member, which you are certainly entitled to? Do you want to ask a question to the relevant cabinet member?
If we put these 20 requests, of which I've given you 4.5, can we expect a considered and careful and hopefully positive response?
Thank you very much, Mr. Brealey, for coming along. Before answering your question as directly as I can, I'd just like to give you a bit of a teaser trailer, if I may, of what's going to be in the revised Old Kent Road Area Action Plan, which will be published on Tuesday of next week and going to Cabinet on the 12th of December. So as you know, we've been consulting for well over 2 years on the future of the Old Kent Road, and we're trying to meet a number of objectives. As we all know, we're in the midst, in the grip of a real housing crisis in our borough and in our city, and we see the Old Kent Road as a location where we can deliver 20,000 new homes, a new town on brownfield land in central London, but better is what we are aiming for. But at the same time, respecting and acknowledging the existing businesses that are on the Old Kent Road, but also the new businesses and new opportunities that we want to bring to the area, as well as making sure we've got the social infrastructure, the schools, the health centre, GP provision, open space provision, a much more pleasant environment on the Old Kent Road itself, stitching the neighbourhoods back together that have been rent apart by the Old Kent Road and the railway line, and very poor urban planning that took place in the 1960s following the bomb damage of the war. The reason why there's been such a pause since our last consultation is because we've been going thoroughly through the 1,300 consultation responses that we received, including from your organisation, from yourself and from your members. The previous consultation was on our preferred option, and we were due to do the next consultation on the final, the submission version. It then goes off to the planning inspector. But because of the substantial revisions we have made following that consultation, we've decided to do another 3 months of consultation, going back a step to the preferred option again, having that 3 months of detailed consultation that kicks off in December and runs through until March, to make sure that we get this right and that we don't repeat the mistakes of the planners of yesteryear. There's significant changes in terms of protection of industrial land. For example, we're redesignating as protected industrial land the Admiral Hyson industrial estate, which was de-designated in 2007. We are also going to retain the protected designation for the Glengall Industrial Estate and the old bottling factory on Ossory Road, the Gallywall Industrial Estate and the west side of Ormside Street and the Penarth Centre itself, to name but a few. We're also giving out real detail on how we can get residential, light industrial uses and other enterprise spaces, maker spaces mixed together so that we can try and meet all of the objectives that we have. Hopefully when you see the draft report when it comes out next week, you'll like a lot of what you read, but going to your point on engagement, send me the 20 points across, we'll meet, we'll work through them, and we'll get progress on as many of those as we can. But we are deadly serious about listening to people, getting in the changes that are needed to support existing businesses, but also help new businesses flourish. And as you say, there are 10,000 jobs in the area, and what we're aiming for is to get 20,000 jobs in the area, doubling employment, opening up opportunities for our residents, so that the significant changes in the Old Kent Road benefit our residents that are here today, as well as new people that will make Southwark their home, both for their home, but also a home for their new businesses as well.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Now, we have 5 minutes for members who wish to ask a question. I have Councillor Williams at the top of my list. I'm not sure whether he wants to ask a question or not, seeing he's made quite a statement. What do you think? Yes? You want to ask a question, dear? No? Yes? Right.
No, I apologise. Will you continue to work at this, Mark, to make this plan as good as we possibly can?
Okay. Next one on my list, Councillor O'Brien would like to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming down and giving us that evidence, Mark. You might be aware there is a planning application coming forward for the old Mandela Way car pound. And interestingly, the latest version is a mix of residential plus also a commercial laundry. My question is, of your members, do you think there is a reasonable, or what percentage of those industries would be able to mix with a residential application as well?
Yes, a substantial proportion could, I believe, if it's designed right. The challenges are also, though, about which businesses can move without excessive stress and threats to their business. So the smaller, standalone, independent businesses are much more challenging to move around than branch businesses. So that's important to bear in mind. But if those issues can be addressed, I think there is a significant proportion of businesses that could be in a mixed development.
Councillor Al Samurai, you'd like to ask a question?
Thanks very much, Mark, for coming along and for explaining quite clearly how the process has been frustrating at times, but also the very real threat to our industrial heritage along the Old Kent Road. I know it's not always seen as glamorous, the Old Kent Road, but actually what happens there with the businesses is pretty special, and I'm very proud of it as a Southwark resident and councillor. I suppose my big fear is that the Old Kent Road becomes a kind of dormitory for people commuting into the city rather than the community and
this
culture
is a question
that is there now. Yeah. You said that there hadn't really been much dialogue. I just wonder, of the dialogue that there has been, what's your understanding of the offer that's being made to existing businesses? I mean, are people being told they have to relocate? I just wondered if you could explain a bit about what dialogue there has been.
Not much. I mean, we've heard of some businesses where money's talked about and discussions around the council purchasing, but that's very limited. Most businesses that I'm hearing from, the offer about the future is vague, unclear. There is not much dialogue or certainty about where we're all heading.
Councillor Barber, you'd like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said how many businesses you represented, but apologies if I missed it. How many employees do those businesses consider to be at risk?
Well, when we looked at the first, I don't know the answer for our members, because we've got 300 members and there's 1,000 businesses approximately. But when we did a review of the first stage of the plan, we reckoned it threatened about half of the economy of the area. That's reduced because of some of these revisions, and we haven't done a new add-up. We will be looking very carefully at the next version. But all that we're hearing indicates there is still a major threat.
Thank you, sir. If there are no further questions, I will thank you for you coming tonight, and I'll ask the officer to just escort you to the back. Thank you, sir. We shall now consider the second community evidence submission on the theme from Belham Parents Air Quality Group. Can the officers please bring forward the group's representatives? Welcome. And as before, you have 5 minutes to address the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to everyone, and thank you for inviting us here to talk about the work that we're developing within the Belham School Air Quality Project. It's a project that came about after many years of the community being concerned about traffic in a very residential area, which includes the Bellenden Road and the run-through traffic that is not residential but actually just passes through the area. I think the recent consultation and debate about the Camberwell Grove Bridge raised that once again, that we have a lot of traffic that really should not be passing through these areas. This area, with the new Belham School, of which we are associated, and we're all parents of children in this school, is residential. Now, what are we doing as the Belham Air Quality Group? Well, the catalyst was one, the back history of the bane of this traffic in our community, but also there's a new school opening, and this school will open to the full complement, as it is now, from year 3 to reception in after Christmas in January, when there'll be 240 children. That will expand to about 450 children, plus staff, of course, in the coming years as the full complement is achieved. The catalyst, with the instrumental sort of support and enthusiasm of Councillor Ali, has decided that as parents we need to do something about this for our community and for our children. What we are intending to do is to look at ways of developing air quality awareness within our community. We want to work as a community to lift the issue up from the community to meet the work that's already going on within the council and from the GLA. There's several things we've noticed. The GLA and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, he has produced a report with tools and resources to be introduced into the curriculum for key stage curricular activities. We've spotted it, we've taken it up, we've taken it to our school and our wonderful new head, Liz Cohen, and we've asked her to work with the teachers to integrate this into the education of the children. They've enthusiastically agreed that this is a wonderful thing to do and great for children's education. It seems sad that our children have to be educated about this when so many of us seem to be unaware of what the impacts of air pollution are. Now, there are 2 ways we're looking at this right now. The first one is to introduce greening. Now, this will be plants recommended by NASA, so from astronauts to the Belham School and our children, this is a wonderful achievement, and we're going to have plants, and we're seeking funds as a group to put plants inside the school to clean the air. I mean, this is a known thing. We're also going to work to put greening outside the school. I think this is known, you might know it already, as green walling. This has some effect, but we want to encourage this. And again, there's an understanding from the children about what the green lung means and how it can be cared for and nurtured. Second to that, we are looking at monitoring, and this is really at the heart of the awareness campaign, because the particulate matter that we're really concerned about is what's called PM 2.5 and PM 10. These are microscopic, but not invisible particles. They lodge themselves in the lungs. We want the children, with the curriculum, to go forward and to monitor the impacts of pollution in their environment. This will be both inside the school. This data will be amassed by the students and put into monitoring key stage science modules for their education. They will also use this in terms of their routes to school, how they get to school, which routes do they use, what are the pollution levels at different stages of their journey, how can they alter that journey to make improvements to their well-being and be active in taking those steps. Now, obviously, there are several issues that go with this. We've heard in our group talking to other schools in the area, and we're reaching out. It can't just be a local issue, it's got to reach out.
You have 30 seconds left.
And we've reached out to other schools, and the impact on poor air quality affects the two great issues that judge us as a society, the young and the old. The impacts on mental development through poor air are clear. The medics are telling us this, and also on old people. The impacts on poor air are even leading to increased susceptibility to Alzheimer's. So we've got to deal with this. What we're looking for...
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And do you have a question to the relevant Cabinet member?
I think one of the things that we'd really like to bring to the Council, and we're aware of the work that you are doing to
You've got to ask a question.
Is, are there any opinions within the Council to approach the issue of school zone, where critical movements of traffic, which are the primary source of these pollutants, can be addressed within something called a school zone? These do exist in other areas and other London boroughs, and would the Council be willing to take those forward?
We're going to get a reply to that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for coming. It's hugely heartening to hear from a group of parents that have pulled together around a particular issue and are deciding just to get something done in a wider context. I'll speak on it in the next motion of really a hugely disappointing national government response to what is, in essence, a public health crisis for our city and our country. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. It sounds really exciting, and I look forward to hopefully working with you going forward. In terms of your question about looking at zoning around schools, I know this is something that's going into the thinking for the Old Kent Road planning at the moment. Hearty nodding there from my colleague, Councillor Williams. So I absolutely don't see why we can't start having that conversation about the borough more widely and see what might be possible within the constraints that exist in the various areas that would be concerned with this. But certainly have to take that forward, look at it, and I'd very much welcome meeting you. I know you've already met with Councillor Wingfield to talk about transport issues, and we also have Councillor Octavia Lamb, Deputy Cabinet Member for Air Quality, who's also focusing on schools. So be delighted to talk to you and get more detailed thoughts on that from you, and also support you in the work that you're doing, and hopefully spread that message out to other schools in the borough as well. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Councillor. We have 5 minutes now for any members who'd like to ask a question. I've got Councillor Cryan to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming. It was really, really interesting deputation, actually. But you were you ran out of time, so you finished on what we are looking. So what are you looking for?
Well, what we're looking for is to raise awareness, and the sad thing is that we've decided that we can't go beat a drum about this, and we have to really reach out to the adults, the middle group, not the young and old, but the people who should care for these groups of our colleagues in the community. And so by using the children doing data, we can raise data and make these invisible pollutants visible through information. The doctors and the scientists, they've been doing it for decades. And the thing is, now we've got to bring it home, and it will be our children that bring those data and their homework to the kitchen tables, and the parents will address their behaviour. We live in a wonderful area, and I think really there's not a lot of parents who are really going to risk their children's welfare and health and well-being and ongoing well-being. But we've got to look at traffic. It's the car, it's the diesel car, it's not just the exhaust fumes, it's the pollutants from brake pad deterioration, it's the deterioration of rubber tyres. A car from top to bottom, whether it's diesel or anything, is a problem. This motion is about buses. Buses are a fundamentally important public transport resource for our cities. The car is not sustainable in our cities. Public transport can be. So we have to work very keenly, and we support Councillor Anderson's motion on this point. But we also need to look at not just the major routes having new low emission or no emission buses, but even the buses that come past us. We have a wonderful bus service that passes right by the school, and it's the P13. It's one of those buses you kind of think, what's a bus doing here? But it's one of those amazing routes that wanders around and goes everywhere, and it's a fantastic service. We have to protect the service, and we've got to say we need no emissions for these routes as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lamb, you'd like to ask a question?
Thank you very much for coming in, Mark and Georgia, and fantastic work that you are doing. You've talked a bit about all the data that you're collecting. I just wanted to ask that you share that data with us, and are there ways that we can help you crunch that data and make it count towards action?
The children of our schools will bring it to you, Councillor. It's going to be community up. We have to work on this together. We fully support the Council's aims. We fully support the Mayor of London's aims on these matters, which are well publicised. But this awareness has to be from the community up. And that's why precisely we work at this very local level, using our children's educational tools to bring an experience to you that must be recognised. This is an ethical issue. It wraps around everything. There has to be new thinking about the way we address this fundamental problem to the health, well-being, and perhaps even the sustainability of what we call this great city.
Thank you. Councillor Seaton, can I ask for a question? You have to be brief now.
Oh, very brief question. Thank you for coming along. An excellent point you've made. And as a father, as indeed a former school governor, and of course a councillor currently, I'd like to encourage you, 1, to network with cycle groups, 2, the centre parks, 3, those concerned parents who are really concerned that their schools are currently on main highways. If you wish my support, indeed my colleagues' support in this regard, we will happily support you in your efforts. There you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Barber, did you reply to that question? Go on.
We're absolutely crammed full of schools. It's considered green. It's one of the wonders of Southwark, as Southwark is a great, wonderful borough. We live in an area that doesn't have really seriously major, like the Old Kent Road. When we think of the schools there, these are the schools. We want to get a project in our area that can lift it up from a really positive community and the great enthusiasm of a new school. We have 2 new schools in our area, actually, because we have the new Bellenden, which will be moving to Troy Town. We really want to work with that new school. We're reaching out to other schools to say the locals got to come together and reach up. It will include, we will be looking out for the other schools to lay down a model. We've done this, how can we do it better? How will it work in your areas? We will reach out.
We have run out of time, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that, Councillor Barber, but I'm sure it was a really good question. It may have to wait for another day. Can I thank you all? Thank you very much. We will now consider the themed motion on culture and well-being. Therefore, Councillor Maisie Anderson, the Cabinet Member for Public Health and Social Regeneration, you have exactly 7 minutes, as much as that, in which to present the themed debate on the motion of the theme.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the early 1950s, Conservative grandee Harold Macmillan rejected calls for air quality legislation. Instead, he suggested forming a committee. We cannot do very much, he is reported to have said, but we can seem to be very busy, and that is half the battle nowadays. Soon after, almost exactly 65 years ago today, a deadly fog enveloped our city. When it lifted, 4 days later, more than 4,000 people had lost their lives. Theatres abandoned shows because the audience couldn't see the stage. Nurses struggled to see the end of their wards. 2 trains collided just near here in London Bridge. This pea super, as they called it, was unlike anything Londoners had seen before. Now, this account may seem more the stuff of Netflix drama than a pertinent political parable to us in 21st century London, but 65 years later, here we are again, with a floundering Tory government refusing to grasp the word crisis in public health crisis, and Londoners again paying the price as we breathe toxic air for another winter. Our London in 2017 is also enveloped by a deadly fog. An estimated 9,500 Londoners die prematurely every year from poor air quality. But our fog is no pea super. It's colourless, it's formed of nitrogen oxides and particulates. Much of this comes from road traffic, from cars, taxis, lorries, vans and buses. The coal-burning fires may have gone, but our Uber and Amazon lifestyles are poisoning our air again. And so that is why I'm putting forward this motion, to help us take action, to promote and improve the health and well-being of everyone who lives and works in Southwark, and indeed across the capital. In Southwark, we're already proactively taking bold measures to play our part in addressing this crisis. We promote the culture of active travel and have invested 30 million in cycling and pedestrian improvements over the next 4 years. Avid readers of the Southwark News will have seen on their front page only last week that we're soon to bring in fines for drivers who refuse to turn off their engines when they're not moving. We're working with schools and parents who want to improve the air quality and the road safety around their buildings. Councillor Octavia Lamb, in her role as Deputy Cabinet Member for Air Quality, is working on a specific project in this area. We're looking into freight consolidation measures and working with business improvement districts to reduce air pollution. Indeed, our bold new air quality strategy has over 130 measures that we're taking to try and reduce Southwark's contribution to London's toxic air. But as councillors, you well know that the most polluted roads in our borough are not within our control, but they're that of TfL. And so this motion also asks for members to support TfL to reduce the number of diesel buses on our roads in favour of much cleaner hybrid ones. Indeed, our Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has been bold in his approach to air quality, and we support him in his endeavours. From the T-charge to the extension of the ULEZ, it's great to finally have a mayor who gives our air the time that it deserves. But pollution knows no political boundaries, and it's for the national government to grasp the nettle and get diesel vehicles off our roads for good. But we know this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. That's why, before last week's budget, I wrote to the Chancellor asking him to introduce a national diesel scrappage fund, and that would be to support low-income households as well as small businesses, charities and schools to replace their diesel vehicles. Sadly, Mr Hammond has not learnt the lessons of Mr Macmillan before him. Our current government, so concerned with seeming busy, trying to extricate the UK from the European Union, appears to think that air quality is something that can be kicked into the long grass. Well, that's just not good enough. It's not good enough that Londoners in deprived areas are twice as likely to die from lung diseases as those in affluent areas. And it's not good enough that the cost to London's economy of air pollution is an estimated £3.7 billion. And it is not good enough that 24% of primary schools in London are in areas that regularly breach legal air pollution limits. We need urgent action, and we need it now. And it's for that reason that I ask you to support the motion this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I would like the lead opposition spokesman to have the opportunity to reply to the Cabinet member's statement and speak to Amendment A. So, Councillor Ben Johnson, you have 5 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hell is a city much like London, a populous and a smoky city. So wrote the great romantic poet Shelley more than 200 years ago. Councillor Anderson has gone back to the 1950s. Perhaps she's been watching The Crown, as I have on repeat. Looking forward to Series 2. I'm going back somewhat further. Indeed, London, sadly, has been synonymous with air pollution, smoke and smog, going back as far as the 1600s. And as the centuries have gone on, of course, the causes have changed. Indeed, since the Clean Air Act in 1956, London has fallen down the most polluted city rankings, losing out to other cities, New Delhi, Hong Kong, Beijing. The factories, of course, have gone. The coal fires are no more. And we now face a different threat, very well described by the Bell and Parents Air Quality Group. These are the pollutants we can't see, those fine particles, just 2.5 microns across, 1/30th the thickness of a human hair. They penetrate deep into the lungs, leading to long-term health problems. And it's these PM2.5, so-called, and other fine particles that we have a power to reduce. The sad irony, of course, is that diesel cars were encouraged as they produce less CO2, the greenhouse gas. But we now know they produce the highest levels of these fine, dangerous pollutants. And that's why, although there's nothing I disagree with in the motion, in some ways it's very disappointing, because the motion correctly identifies the problem, Mr. Mayor, but it doesn't propose a single action that we in this room can take, or that the council can take. So forgive me for being ambitious for our borough, and forgive me for believing that we in this room here can tackle air pollution, and forgive me for believing in the transformative power, Mr. Mayor, of local government, because there are 3 key ways that we can reduce air pollution: transport, schools and planning, and I will deal with each of these in turn. On transport, we need to reduce car use, increase walking, increase public transport. This is all well understood, but there's much more that the council can do. We need to finally commit to extending the cycle hire through to Bermondsey and Rotherhithe, and TfL will cover the running costs of this, and support the Bakerloo line stations at Bricklayers Arms. On school, thank you. On school, so unusual to hear applause there. Thank you. What's that strange noise? On schools, children, as we know, are particularly affected if their schools are in pollution hotspots, such as near main roads. And I fully applaud and support the parents group who came in. We need to know the scale of the problem at our schools. We need to commit to additional monitoring, and having it as a citizen science project involving the students is an excellent idea. And we should explore public monitors as well, which we're calling for, so that all residents can see the levels of pollution. Thirdly, the planning system is a powerful tool to tackle pollution. I and many others here are passionate about planning, about the power of planning, and I'm especially concerned, as are many, about the hidden pollution during the construction of buildings, which is often the main pollution from development. So we're calling on the council to use existing powers to levy Section 106 charges for the most polluting developments, and using this money on air pollution mitigation, including these pollution detectors in schools. This change is recommended by the Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and there's no good reason why these powers shouldn't be used. So our amendment is brief, perhaps uncharacteristically so, and focused on actions. Indeed, you could be forgiven for thinking that Councillor Anderson and I had sat down over a cup of tea, collaborating, putting together a 2-part motion and amendment with a detailed description of the problem, and then the actions that the council should take. There's no good reason why this amendment shouldn't have cross-party support. I urge you to vote for the amendment and the amended motion, and take clear action as a local authority to tackle the blight of air pollution in Southwark.
As part of the programme motion, the meeting has agreed to have a combined debate on the motion and the amendment. So I've got a list of members who wish to speak to Amendment A and the motion itself. But the first on the list I have is Catherine Dale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Anderson, for this motion. I wanted to take the opportunity to speak more broadly about well-being, as this is the theme of the motion, and air quality is one aspect of well-being that we're specifically considering today. But the concept of well-being it's the sort of terminology that's relatively new, and some of it comes out of psychology. And originally psychology focused on mental ill health, the sort of work that Freud did. But other psychologists came along and started talking about what would it take for people to thrive, to do even better than we would do just naturally, as it were. And one of the people that talked about this was a bloke called Abraham Maslow, who was born in 1908 in Brooklyn in New York, and his parents were Jewish immigrants. And when he was 33, the US entered World War II. He was working as a psychology researcher and educator. He had 2 children, and he was ineligible to be part of the military. But like many psychologists at that time, World War II profoundly affected him and actually helped him to think about ways in which we could encourage people in the world to thrive. And he came up with what is quite a famous theory now about the hierarchy of needs. This is a theory about motivation, which is all about what are the things that drive us to do the things that we do as human beings. And we may have heard about this. I've certainly heard about it quite a lot in work. I work for the health service, and people are often quoting the hierarchy of needs. I'm just going to quickly run through them now. I've got enough time. So you start off with your physiological needs, which are things like breathing and food and water and shelter, clothing and sleep. Then you move on to safety and security, which includes in his list property, health, employment, family and social stability. And then we move on to what's considered to be psychological needs, including love and belonging and self-esteem. And ultimately, we get to self-fulfillment, morality, creativity, spontaneity, purpose, meaning and inner potential.
30 seconds.
Okay, quickly. Basically, I think sometimes people think about these hierarchy of needs as if they're only some people can reach them. We all have these needs, and we therefore have a responsibility to provide things that will help everybody reach their full potential. We've got to get these basics right. We're responsible for plenty of the things that meet the basic needs, but that's in order to help people make their full potential. And I think that's what we mean by well-being.
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Yasmin Ali?
That was really fascinating. I'm going to find that difficult to follow now. I just wanted to, Mr. Mayor, I did want to thank Councillor Anderson, Councillor Lamb, and also my fellow group mates from the Bellum for this timely and important motion on air quality. Our health, your health, our children's health is at stake. And it is no exaggeration to say that air quality is a matter of life and death. But we need to look at why is it it's not a new issue, and the government have behaved appallingly on this issue. 40% of people in the UK die a year because of air pollution. We are being killed slowly by dirty fumes poisoning our lungs, while our children are developing debilitating asthma. There are apps. I mean, the Bellenden Parents Group, we all have these apps now called Plume. I don't know if people are familiar with them, but it's an app, and then you just click it on in the morning to see how polluted your area is. So it will let you know if it is safe to go jogging. Imagine, we spend all this time building these lovely, amazing parks and not being able to use them because the air is not safe. So my question is, where is the leadership on this? The fact is that the government department have consistently played this issue down. Even today, When I looked on the DEFRA website, you need a microscope to see any reference to air quality, and it's appalling. DEFRA are behaving appallingly on this. Counter this with the approach of Sadiq Khan. He has plastered information about the real dangers of air pollution all over the bus stops, expose the fact that nearly 10,000 Londoners die a year because of air pollution, that London, and we're talking about schools, has no less than 443 schools smack bang in the middle of areas exceeding the safe, legal pollution limit. Now, I fully support this motion. I support the amendment. We must act now. I fully support the motion and approach of my own children's school, which we've heard from. Innovative ways to engage pupils, teachers and other schools in raising awareness and engaging in projects and activities. I will encourage the Council to act, but I'm not here to tell you don't worry, because this action, everything will be okay. Far from it. We all need to step up
30 seconds.
1 minute. Step up our action together. We cannot continue to allow the motoring lobby and big business, its government and the government, to put profits before the safety and health of our children. So we have to keep on doing what we're doing, rely on our own strength, and let's keep on piling on the pressure.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Whitehead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to very much publicly support the need for urgent action on air pollution, and I think discuss in that context the Rotherhithe Bridge, which was recently approved for consultation by TfL. Now, as a ward member of Surrey Docks, where the bridge will be built, and also a resident of the area, I very much support the bridge, and it's close to my heart. I'm therefore delighted that TfL has started a broad public consultation on this and appointed a dedicated team to work on the project. The Liberal Democrats have been campaigning for a bridge in Rotherhithe since the mid-noughties, and it was the major topic of my own by-election just over a year ago. Since then, Surrey Docks local councillors, including myself and Caroline Pidgeon at City Hall, who is our representative there, have been working closely with TfL over the past few months on these plans. As I've discussed at previous council assembly, the Rotherhithe Peninsula faces considerable challenges from a transport perspective. It's partly due to geography and partly due to overcrowding on local transport infrastructure, such as at Canada Water, and an absence of cycle hire, for instance, as a means for encouraging other means of transport to leave the peninsula. The bridge will provide a much-needed environmentally friendly solution, which should also go some way to tackling the air pollution problem in the area. But for it to happen, it needs both funding and cycle infrastructure to be put in place. And I have two major concerns in that regard. Firstly, there is no clear current plan for how funding will be obtained for the project. When I met with TfL only just last month, they indicated that there was currently no funding being offered by the Southwark Council or British Land. British Land being the major developer in this area, and that TfL will be expected to foot the bill. We urge Southwark Council to publicly commit to providing funding for the bridge as soon as possible and to pressurise their friends at British Land to do the same. Secondly, Rotherhithe remains one of the only parts of Zones 1 to 2 that does not have cycle hire. The Council has continued to make noises about committing money to the expansion of this scheme, but has manifestly failed to do so to date. Even council officers recently admitted that less than 1% of the required capital investment has so far been allocated to this scheme. A Liberal Democrat council will prioritise investment in these infrastructure projects. We believe they offer one of the best opportunities to reduce air pollution and improve transport in the area. Thank you.
Can I call upon Councillor Kieran Williams? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm absolutely delighted we're having this discussion today. Air quality is such an enormous impact on our population and that of our country. Around about 9,000 people die every year in London from air quality. To put that in context, that's 5 times as many as die in our entire country in road traffic accidents. It's an incredible burden on our population, and as Maisie said so eloquently, that burden falls most heavily on those who have the least life chances in our society. It falls on the poorest, it falls on those who are suffering many other inequalities, and it makes those inequalities deeper and harder. Now, I think we have to make a huge investment to change this. We need a government that really invests in these issues, one that says that it will, yes, change road traffic so it is clean for everyone, but also invest in the infrastructure we need. Now, as a Southwark councillor, I'm delighted that we have got a commitment to have the Bakerloo line going down the Old Kent Road. But as a Camberwell councillor, I was deeply upset to see that we didn't get the extension where we needed it. And the reason for that is fundamental. It is because we have a government that doesn't believe in investing in transport infrastructure in areas that already have a dense population. It doesn't believe in investing at record low interest rates in putting in place the serious transport infrastructure our densely populated, rapidly growing city needs. So I think we should all actively be calling on this government, and indeed campaigning for the kind of government we really need, a Labour government that invests in decent, high-quality transport infrastructure that can help clean up our air in our city and across our country.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Can I call upon Councillor Peter John, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's really just in response to Councillor Whitehead's comments really about the Rotherhithe Bridge. I thought there was going to be a complete Lib Dem claim of securing the bridge, ignoring the fact that it's a Labour mayor who gave the commitment for the bridge, a deputy mayor who was once Labour. Obviously she's not, she's fully independent now as a civil servant, who is overseeing. But I think it's important to note TfL have committed £150 million. It's within their budget for the Rotherhithe Bridge, and at the moment nobody's anticipating that the bridge will cost more than £150 million. So if TfL are willing to pay for it, I'm not going to rush forward with Southwark council taxpayers' money to say we should pay for it instead. And also, let's not forget, the bridge lands in Tower Hamlets, so if anyone's going to pay for it, you know, maybe they should pay for some of it as well. Why not? Well, it's going to benefit their economy because it's going to help actually workers in and out of Canary Wharf. So, Mr. Mayor, it was really just that point of information. I think it's right to acknowledge that we as a Labour Council have been campaigning for a Rotherhithe footbridge. Councillor White is absolutely right. It was the subject matter of the by-election in Surrey Docks last year, but it was already on the agenda, and I'm very pleased that a Labour Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has committed to delivering this, along with his commitment to deliver the Bakerloo line extension down the Old Kent Road. And who knows, Councillor Kieran Williams, what we will get in terms of support for Camberwell in due course when we continue to have a Labour Mayor into the future, into 2020 and beyond. Who knows? Because Labour is the party which always delivers for London and this part of the world.
Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Livingston?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this debate, and whilst we were all violently agreeing with each other, I still thought perhaps it wasn't worth speaking. But there were a few things that I thought it was worth picking up on. Peter picked up on some of the points about the Rotherhithe Bridge, and I think it's worth saying that there were plenty of Labour councillors that were campaigning for the Rotherhithe Bridge long before the Surrey Docks by-election and Councillor Whitehead came onto the scheme. I was certainly one of those people, and I know many other colleagues as well. I'm glad that actually this is something that we've got cross-party, cross-council support for, to have that bridge. And it does tie into something, though, in what I think was actually a very interesting amendment from Councillor Johnson about the cycle hire scheme, because we do have this odd situation where we have the cycle hire scheme in central London and at Canary Wharf, and actually if you have a bridge connecting Canary Wharf to Southwark, it actually makes a lot of sense for the cycle hire scheme to be spread eastward to take in Bermondsey and Rotherhithe, because otherwise you have a disjoint in the whole system there. So I think it is really important that we push for that. I think it's also important that we do actually, yes, find some money to put towards that from the council. I think that's something as a cabinet that we are happy to do, to find money to put towards that, and that is something that we commit ourselves to. The other thing I wanted to touch on, though, was the issue about specifically about pollution, because I probably have the most polluted ward potentially in the borough, I think, with the Old Kent Road. Yeah, the Old Kent Road is a horrific black spot for pollution. I have Councillor Mills next to me who always tells me that she has the prettiest wards in the borough and that I have the ugliest. And the pollution on the Old Kent Road, I think, whilst I disagree with her, it's sometimes difficult to make my case when you look at the Old Kent Road. We've interestingly, as part of the South Bermondsey Partnership, done some work already with the local community and schools measuring pollution. And we've actually had a number of monitoring stations all around the area, sort of about 20 or 30 of them in the area. And I think what was very interesting from the outcomes of that, it does actually show that actually relatively small interventions can make a difference. And so I think that's a lesson we should learn, that whilst we have huge problems the Old Kent Road, and the Area Action Plan is going to pick up some of that and is going to improve that, we shouldn't get away from the fact that actually making a few changes here and there can make a real difference to air quality. And so I think we need to bear that in mind as we take this forward.
Councillor Damien O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the spirit of cross-party consensus, I'd like to thank all the members in this room who are supporting the cross-party and non-party campaign to have a tube station at the Bricklayers Arms. I'd also like to thank all of the members who attended the rally on the 4th of November, and I'd especially like to thank Mr. Mayor and Councillor Dennis for speaking at that rally. Just to bring you up to date, TfL have been rather inconsistent in their position on that. In face-to-face meetings, they've said to us that all options are on the table, nothing's been decided, there'll be another consultation early next year. They then gave a quote to BBC London, basically saying that the site was rejected, but they're now reconsidering it because of public demand. And then they also gave another quote to Southwark News to say that their position hasn't changed. The problem is now we don't know which position they haven't changed. There appear to be three issues. The first is the site. They would ideally like 10,000 square metres, and Bricklayers Arms is 6,000 square metres. I got a bit confused by that because I thought the station was going to be underground. They've managed to build on sites for Bermondsey and for Southwark, which are clearly smaller, so I really don't see the problem. They also said that there are a lot of utilities under the roundabout, but if they're not going to build the station, they want to build the ventilation shaft. Surely the ventilation shaft goes over the tunnel, which is going to pass through the utilities under the Bricklayers Arms roundabout, so I'm a bit confused about that one. And the third is that the PTAL is very high. The PTAL is very high because of the number of bus routes that go down the Old Kent Road. The whole point of this is to try and reduce the amount of surface traffic, to reduce the amount of congestion and improve the air quality on the Old Kent Road. That's the point. Returning to the ventilation shaft, if I've got time, the ventilation shaft is expensive. It costs £50 million. A station will cost roughly £120 million. So effectively, it only costs 70 million more to have the station. There'll still be years of disruption and construction going on there for the ventilation shaft, and we get nothing for it at the end. So it will be quite a cheap station at the end of the day. We are planning some meetings with more senior TfL people, and hopefully Caroline Pidgeon's office will be able to help us with that. But I'd actually like to write to Mayor Sadiq Khan to put our case for the Bricklayers Arms, and I was hoping that could be cross-party as well. And I was hoping the letter could be countersigned by maybe the leader...
30 seconds.
Thank you. The leader, the relevant cabinet members and the ward councillors as well. I hope you'll join us to do that. And really, if anyone could have a quiet word with the MP, we'd love to have his signature as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kersley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the Cabinet Member for her motion. And in particular, I'd like to take this time to talk about the benefits of walking. And I've also got a poem, like Councillor Johnson, so we really are the borough of culture here in Southwark. In his poem London, William Blake wrote of walking the streets of London and said, "I wandered through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe." Has walking in London cheered up since Blake's day? Well, yes and no. Whilst our streets may no longer be full of crying chimney sweeps and churches blackened by our dirty factories, we have other less visible dangers. Our air is at record levels of pollution. London has been here for 2,000 years, but in the past 100 years, increases in car traffic and polluting vehicles have taken over the streets that Londoners used to walk. The mental and physical benefits of walking are well known, but it is also the best way to see our fantastic city. My own walk to work most mornings contains both positive encounters and, I'm afraid, some of those marks of woe. I cross beautiful Burgess Park, down the historic church estate buildings of Portland Street and the early bustle of East Street Market, greet helpful lollipop men and end up crossing the Thames to see London in all her glory. However, I also sadly hold my breath around the Elephant and Castle with its record air pollution, navigate several building sites spilling out onto the pavement, and join a mad dash of school-run mums and children trying to get across the road before the lights change, and we are stranded hoping one of London's numerous HGVs won't run us down. So I'd like to ask Council Assembly and Cabinet, what more can we do for walkers? Can we make all our streets, roads and construction safe to pass? Can we make our streets green and great, supporting innovative ideas like the Walworth Low Line and Peckham Coal Line? And can we call on our Mayor to do even more? Sadiq Khan has appointed a commissioner for cycling and walking. And this sounds great, but let's get him across the road from City Hall and over here to talk to us about what his plans are. But most of all, as the Cabinet members said, let's do everything we can to tackle London's dirty air, so that in another 100 years, our great-great-grandchildren aren't digging out poems about walking in miserable and polluted London.
Councillor Johnson-Situ.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Mr. Mayor, we've rightly heard from colleagues on the importance of tackling our poor air quality head-on. To tackle this, the Council is leading from the front and taking a number of steps which have been highlighted by my colleague, Councillor Maisie Anderson. As mentioned, Councillor Lamb is particularly focusing on the role our schools are playing. So I would like to take the next minute to highlight the crucial role our cultural organisations and businesses are playing. One of our leading cultural educational organisations, ULL, has recently concluded on its sustainability strategy. At its heart, it's the environment. Using innovative technology and soft interventions such as plants to improve indoor air quality. Improving interest in urban horticulture, gardening lessons, growing food on the UAL estate. And crucially, a focus on biodiversity on estates and the roof of the gardens as well. I know the environment was also a key part of Mount View's plans. Mr. Mayor, there are now over 16,000 registered businesses in the borough, and many of our large businesses have environment at the heart of their sustainability. However, I would like to pay particular attention and recognise the work of our business improvement districts and the recent success of both Better Bankside and Team London Bridge in being awarded a £217,000 grant from the GLA and TfL. This grant will be awarded to improve and implement innovative air quality initiatives in the delivery of low-emission neighbourhoods. Working in collaboration, the GLA funding will be used to pioneer new measures around Borough High Street, enhancing and promoting quieter routes, as well as reducing emissions on our main roads. In short, our businesses play a crucial role in our borough. And certainly, conversations I have, and I'm sure many people in the room today, you'll be able to identify that they are willing partners in tackling and cleaning up our air. Thank you.
Thank you. That was brief, yeah. Councillor Al-Samiraya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I, like Catherine Dale, was a bit confused that the culture and wellbeing theme has been quite so narrowly focused on air quality, but very happy to talk about that, given our part of London has some of the dirtiest air in the country, but also Jamaica Road in my ward is one of the particular hotspots for air pollution, and we will hear later from residents around the Tideway site about how that's being added to, not only with the work at that site, but the construction vehicles that we see along Jamaica Road constantly. I know that the council can't do everything, but it is disappointing that the Labour motion doesn't suggest more that could definitely be done locally. We can and we must do something about our infrastructure here in Southwark, and there are plenty of ways for the council to make life easier for cyclists and pedestrians. plenty of ways to cut the need for vehicles and to cut pollution. And the most obvious example, referred to by Labour members themselves this evening, is the bike hire scheme. The bike hire scheme is reliable, it's convenient, it's flexible. Not everyone has space for a bike. Not everyone wants a return journey, and not everyone has a predictable routine. And that's why the scheme has grown so rapidly. There are more than 9 million hires this year alone. Docking stations are a feature of streets north, east, west and southwest, but not here. Southwark's coverage is pretty pitiful. We are virtually a docking station desert. And the real frustration is that TfL have actually offered to pay the running costs. All the council has to do is fund the one-off capital costs. And we know that our residents want to cycle more. TfL's survey found that Rotherhithe and Bermondsey residents were in its top 5 for likely switchers to two wheels. So it makes it all the more urgent, Mr Mayor, that we close the gap between North and South London, between Southwark and its neighbours. Lambeth is building docking stations. Tower Hamlets is fully covered. Even Wandsworth, where council tax can be paid for in stamps, has more than Southwark. And the Labour leader talked about Labour delivering, but they haven't delivered on this. This was their manifesto commitment. And as my colleague said, less than 1% of money towards the bike hire scheme has been allocated. Developers are building massively in this borough. They're making huge profit, and they ought to be contributing to the infrastructure we desperately need. The state of Southwark's air should be a priority. The council was able to give £1 million to the Tate Modern without any consultation at all. Surely it could, but it's a good point. You've got £1 million to give to the Tate Modern without any consultation. That's less than it cost Lambeth to roll out their bike hire scheme to Brixton. 7 years after Southwark promised to bring docking stations to Rotherhithe and Bermondsey, they are nowhere to be seen. It's time.
Thank you. Thank you. We've had 10 speakers so far. I'm going to call the last speaker now because we want to get on to other business later on. Adele Morris.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Air quality is indeed a significant problem across Southwark and across the country. And we do acknowledge the steps that Southwark has taken to promote walking and cycling in the borough. But we need to go much further. Unfortunately, some of TfL and Southwark's well-intentioned schemes to improve the environment for walking and cycling, such as the Blackfriars Road Cycle Superhighway and the redesign of the Elephant and Castle roundabouts, have contributed to increased congestion on local residential roads because they've not given sufficient thought to the displacement of traffic. We cannot assume that traffic will go away if it is just too difficult to drive around. All that happens is people, with the assistance of sat-navs, will try and shortcut. We do need both mayoral and government support to persuade residents to ditch their highly polluting diesel cars through the diesel scrappage scheme and other incentives. We also need to better promote the health benefits of walking and cycling and using public transport. But it is a difficult message to sell, as no one likes being told that they can't drive a car anymore. And indeed, I wonder how many people there are in this chamber who still drive a car, which is contributing to the pollution. But what we can enforce locally is our planning policy, and we need to make sure that all new schemes are car-free in areas of high transport accessibility, other than for the provision of disabled parking. In planning, we also need to be stringent about our requirements for regulated carbon dioxide emissions for all major developments. New homes forming part of major developments are required to meet an on-site 35% CO2 reduction target for regulated carbon dioxide emissions. And since October 2016, they're also required to offset all remaining emissions to 100% or zero carbon emissions in order to meet the target for the London Plan. There are many ways to achieve this using renewable energies and technologies. However, schemes do come before the Planning Committee unable to meet this requirement. Although this should only be in exceptional circumstances, the Council has established a Section 106 fund for cash-in-lieu contributions from developers, which can be spent on projects around the borough that offset carbon emissions. This fund currently holds over 100,000 just from developments in Cathedral's ward, And if the 18 Blackfriars scheme finally gets off the ground...
30 seconds.
Thank you. They will be paying £856,640, yes, you did hear that right, into this fund. And the money in this fund should be being used now to support local projects that tackle air quality. In Cathedral's ward, we're suggesting some of our local projects from schools and residents could be put forward for this funding. It's good to be monitoring where we have poor air quality, but only action on air quality will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We are reaching the end of this session, so I now shall ask Councillor Anderson to respond to the debate, and you have 3 minutes in which to respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions to the debate. I think in the spirit of the issue, solidarity is what we need. This is a hugely complex problem, and I am delighted that the opposition group agree with our motion, and we will also support your amendment. There have been a lot of different particular issues that have come up, but again, I think that we can work together on these. Councillor Johnson, I'd be happy to have a cup of tea with you, and perhaps we could sit down and pore over the bold new air quality strategy. I don't know if you read it or not. It came out whilst I was on maternity, but I did read it myself. It has 130 actions, so I'd be delighted to pore over them with you. And I'd also commend you to read the new Southwark plan that is later on in the agenda for this evening, that has several really bold sections on air quality, many of which speak to exactly what some of your members have been speaking about this evening. I think my key takeaways from the debate is that we need to be innovative, we need to work together with parents, we need to work across the council. Every department needs to have this front and centre when they're thinking about the decisions that we're making, because fundamentally when we're talking about air quality, we're talking about equality, because as I said in my opening remarks, this isn't a burden that is spread fairly across our society, and therefore it is on the shoulders of everybody here in this room and everybody out there in Southwark and in London to do their part to address it. And that's why I call for solidarity, and I also just would like to commend Councillor Dell in particular on bringing up the issue of well-being more widely. This is absolutely fundamental to the well-being of all Londoners in reaching their potential. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to value number 4. Working for everyone to realise their own potential in Southwark. I think that encapsulates the debate that we've had this evening, and I hope that members will be supporting the motion. Thank you very much.
I shall now move to the vote on Amendment A. Can I ask all those in favour of Amendment A? Please show.
Unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Well done. That saves us a bit of time, doesn't it? Good. I shall now like unanimous. Well done. Good. We move on. It is now time for deputations. As part of the programme motion, members agreed to hear 3 deputations. So can officers please bring forth the first deputation from Chambers Wharf local residents? Welcome to you all. You have 5 minutes, I think. That's right. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Gary Kandinsky. I've come along today with various members of the community who reflect, the people you see here reflect the sort of people who do live on the eastern edge of the Chambers Wharf development, i.e. it's a mixed community, people from ethnic minority backgrounds. Very few got into Bermondsey a few years ago, and also a lot of disabled people, and several of us have got physical disabilities. I'd like to thank you for seeing our deputation today. I want to talk to you about the Thames Water Super Sewer construction project, which is blighting the lives of around 500 homes and has an impact on a further 500 more at probably a lower level, the sort of first tier, frontline as we would call it, and then the properties a little bit further away. We believe the Super Sewer project was a massive corporate scam stroke tax dodge with fake green and economic credentials. This council previously unanimously condemned Chambers Wharf site being selected as one of the main drive sites, which means the digger machines will go and we'll have all the nightmare of living next to that. And so far this has involved months of demolition of buildings and a concrete jetty. It was so loud that I had to be moved out because I've got hearing damage from a sort of from flu. And the use of concrete hammering and sawing that went on all day long and was just absolutely unbearable. You talked about air quality. We've had endless dust as all these mounds of asbestos-filled rubble were all moved away, some of it by on the river, but where it was thrown in, and there was totally inadequate dust suppression, so that all our back gardens and our windows and our lungs were coated with dust. We had several months of impact piling, which is where literally they would hit things like railway lines into the ground with huge hammers, and then vibration piling that we were told would be okay. That was so bad that the lights in our homes would be moving around as if you were having a séance. Constant drilling into the site where they're firing high pressure liquids to solidify the ground, which causes waves of vibration that you can feel out on the street as if the road is moving and in your home, and is causing cracks in our houses. Equipment deliveries at 6 o'clock in the morning. Lorries taking concrete away rather than it going in barges as promised. And a floodlit work area that's been a cause of sleep deprivation to especially the people who are living right on the front line. It's almost like you're looking headfirst into the floodlights at the Den, and that has been going on all through the dark season and again late at night. And that's on top of like occasional disruptions, like when the barge nearly sunk and we had people working all night. And the current situation is even worse. There's working 6 days a week, Monday to Friday till 10 o'clock, with an hour for closing down. They're meant to start at 8, but they're often hanging around at 10 to 7. There was an incident round the flats recently where a load of bentonite powder was blown towards where we live, and where there were 2 newborn children sleeping. Bentonite powder's like talcum powder, and if you breathe it in, it can cause inflammation in the lungs. We've got 5 more years of this. Now we know that Thames Tideway have powers very much like the London Docklands Development Corporation.
30 seconds.
Powers that you would have had. We're calling upon the council, however, to require officers to provide the maximum levels of protection legally possible for frontline residents. That's not been achieved. To critically review every consent and licence that Tideway ask for officers to work with the community, not against it, through the Community Liaison Working Group, and to actively facilitate the outstanding mitigation and compensation that frontline properties need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, sir. Do you have a question of the leader or the relevant cabinet member?
Yes, we do. Can the council set aside half of the Section 106 community enhanced fund for the residents that are covered by the TAPS, that is the Trigger Action Plan, without going through any bidding. We should be exempt.
Councillor John, want to respond to that?
I think it was asked. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear quite properly. Were you asking for half of the flats somewhere?
The question was,
Can the council
Yep.
set aside
Yep.
half of the Section 106 community fund
Yep.
for the residents that are covered by the
Yep.
Trigger Action Plan without going through any bidding?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much to Gary and the deputation for coming this evening. That's it's a technical question which I don't know the answer to, and it would be wrong of me to give an answer without full knowledge of what the implications might be. What I would say to you again is that cross-party, this council has great sympathy for all of you who are living adjacent to these works. We always said right from the outset this was not the right place for this to be a drive site. We always said that this would be the consequence for people who live close by of Thames Tideway going ahead and having a drive shaft here. And the saddest thing, I think, is that our greatest fears have come true in so many ways. What I can say again to you today is that from the highest levels within the authority, you have our commitment that we remain absolutely on your side. We will do everything that we can to bring influence to bear on Thames Tideway and their management. We're waiting still for a response from the Chief Executive of Thames Tideway to a letter from Eleanor Kelly, our Chief Executive, which was sent, I think, over a week ago now, dealing with some of the most pressing issues from the recent overruns and problems that you've experienced. I'll look into the specific point that you have raised, and I will come back to you. We will come back with a full response. What we've tried to do throughout this period is, in dealings with Thames Tideway, to make sure that the processes are as simple and straightforward as possible. It hasn't always been easy, you know, as residents, because you've lived it and you've seen, even with us as your advocates, it's not always been easy to bash down some of the bureaucracy that Thames Tideway have put in place. Sometimes it feels to stop you getting the compensation that you deserve. But we'll carry on battling on your behalf and with you, and I can only express my sympathy that, as I say, some of our fears have come true in respect of what's happened and the consequences of what's happened with this unsuitable site.
Thank you. Well, at this stage we have 5 minutes for any members who'd like to ask a question of the deputation, and I know that Councillor Al Samurai has indicated she'd like to.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Gary, for that deputation, which I think explained really clearly the kind of what it's actually like on the ground around a site. And this isn't any normal building site. What's going on is a 7-year project of the kind of deepest, most profound impact on the community. And I just want to thank all of you for the work you've done, not just this evening, but in bringing the issues to the agenda, both with Tideway, with senior officers here at the council and with councillors. It's been a lot of work and time that residents have put in. You talked a bit about things like lighting, the hours that they're working, the bentonite, also the way the kind of compensation panel has worked. And I just wondered if you could say what you think the council could be doing more, particularly whether it's in terms of legal or enforcement action, to really be tougher on Tideway on those areas you've particularly mentioned.
On the question of enforcement, we've yet to see any enforcement by Southwark Council undertaken. There is an intervention. There are officers who are meant to look after our interests, but in no cases so far have we seen any enforcement. Now, I was told by one of the senior officers that after the explosion of bentonite, that if an offence had been committed, there would be a prosecution, but I've not heard anything back on that. Now, in terms of supporting the residents, Tideway have closed down discussion with the community by turning the community forum, the community liaison working group, into a drop-in centre, thus freezing us out from speaking, even suppressing the community, the mental health and well-being work that Public Health Southwark did to help us, so that they couldn't speak. And some of your officers are not right-sided with residents, working to get Tideway to change the format of that back and to start the community conversation going, and we're very disappointed on that. Housing could have been better. Housing did not go in and survey its own properties before they started hammering the hell out of them. That's quite frankly appalling.
And say something.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hargrove, you have a question?
I think...
You want?
Yeah, thank you, Gary, and the team for coming tonight. I want to ask you about some recent incidents. There was an incident on the 7th of November, an incident on the 15th of November, an incident on the 22nd of November, two of which involved the late pouring of concrete. And I hear what you say about our response hasn't always been perfect, but would you say that in those instances, the council responded as fully as it could? And are you aware of the letter that Eleanor Kelly has written to Thames Tideway, demanding that they get their act together, including saying that their behaviour had fell well below levels expected?
Sorry, I'd like to answer this one. We don't think, yes, I've got a copy of the letter from Peter and also from Eleanor. We don't think the council have gone far enough to actually say to Tideway next time they're going to be prosecuted. Also, on the site, we have got a problem because on the east of the Tideway, where we have a lot of problems, a lot of the residents are BMEs, and we feel that we've been treated differently from other residents, and we feel so let down by this council. It's totally unacceptable, really. The council need to do more for the residents. They're not doing nothing at the moment. They're not putting any pressure on Tideway. Eleanor's letter did not go far enough. It did not go far enough. It was just for the residents to shut up. I mean, we're badly treated, very much so.
And there was an opportunity for the council to enforce or to push on Tideway its duty to conduct an equality impact assessment before they started the work. And we understand that equality impact assessment that was going to be done between Tideway and the council never happened because you gave voluntary severance to the officer who was ready to start doing it, and they ran out the door. And I have now got the Ombudsman conducting a deep dive review of what this council's doing. The vulnerable were let down and the vulnerable were ignored by Tideway, and you could have done a lot more as a council to protect BME and disabled residents.
And what we're trying
Thank
to...
you. Time's up, sorry. Can I ask officers to bring forward, I beg your pardon, to thank the deputation. Thank you very much for coming. And can I ask officers to escort you to the back of the room, and you are welcome to listen to the rest of the debate. Sorry for those members who didn't get the opportunity to ask a question there, but time's against us. Can I ask officers to please bring forward the second deputation? This is from the Latin American business community in the Elephant and Castle. Thank you very much and welcome. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are a group of business people representing the Latin community
the Latin American business community in the area of the Elephant and Castle. La Bodeguita has taken part in the consultation process. However, we understand that other Latin American businesses have not been included in plans to regenerate the area. A number of us in the current shopping centre are concerned because we believe that the upgrade work will force us out with no offer of compensation. We are a very important part of the community with many small and large businesses in the area. We are a vibrant, creative community with much to offer. We do not believe that it's generally known or appreciated how important we are to the commercial life of the area. We strongly believe that our contribution to the economy is of major importance. Research shows that there is a cluster of about 100 Latin American businesses in the area, 15% of which are located in the Elephant and Castle shopping centre, creating employment for no less than 50 people in the shopping centre. This figure does not account for indirect employment, for example, the delivery of goods, provisions of financial and legal services, and production of publicity material. A strong sense of community amongst retailers has fostered diversity in commercial activities, which now range from specific ethnic foods, retail, fashion, to broader legal and financial professional services. The majority of owners, 72%, are of Colombian origin and of relatively young, with 77% born in the 1960s or thereafter. Some businesses have grown to become key employers of the community, such as La Bodeguita, Distri Andina, and La Chatica. But most remain small, family enterprises. Many have joined husband and wife ownerships, and women play a prominent role in enterprises, with an average of 41% of Latin businesses at Elephant and Castle owned by women. The Latin American community has been active in the borough for generations and have fought very hard to present a positive identity for our culture. Now, with the area around the Elephant and Castle, especially the shopping centre, being redeveloped, we are concerned about our future. It would be a terrible loss for the area if the process of this regeneration, the positive and productive atmosphere created by the Latin businesses, was to be removed. Our deputation of the 27th of November 2013, you promised to create a designated Latin quarter with the excitement, colour, creativity and energy of the Latin culture, where all people of all cultures will be drawn to such an area, establishing a direct Latin character to the development of the elephant regeneration. We would like to receive confirmation that this will actually happen. We are not opposed to the development or regeneration. We have already contributed a great deal to the prosperity of the area, but we are concerned that the redevelopment of the Elephant and Castle will result in a great damage to our businesses. Businesses will be scattered or closed, affecting the income for a large number of families. You have already engaged in our culture by supporting Plaza Latina, the Latin American Food and Craft Market, and others. However, the redevelopment of the Elephant and Castle shopping centre threatens to disperse the cultural community in the Elephant and Castle. If this is not to happen, policy initiatives to retain the community intact are required. The policies which have so far been proposed are not adequate to achieve this. The Land Use Planning Application 16 AP 4458 has been amended after Latin Elephant's objection and following the deputation to Southwark Council's Cabinet meeting on the 9th of May 2017. The planning application now includes the draft local business support and relocation strategy. Despite this, we feel that the document fails to address some of the key concerns raised previously in our objection via Latin Elephant. The strategy does not provide of BAME traders to remain clustered throughout the relocation and in returning to the new development, as evidenced in the reports. The case of London's Latin Quarter.
30 seconds.
Sustainability relocation alternative to traders. In order to realise the Council's promise to create and maintain the Latin Quarter at the Elephant and Castle, we need the following: an assurance that the businesses trading from the railway arches facing the Elephant Road will be protected in the current location, or at worst relocated to other arches in the Elephant Road. 2. Concrete plans for the temporary relocation of the businesses which are currently trading in and around the shopping centre. 3. Concrete plans for their return to the Elephant when development is completed. 4.
Thank you very much.
Financial arrangements.
Your time is now up. Sorry about that. can I ask, do you have a question to the relevant cabinet member?
Yes, we would like to know when the council can give us clarity as to how the cluster of the Latin businesses will remain. Also, how businesses' rates and businesses' rent will be looked after for the community. And most important, I think, which I've mentioned, is the clustering that was promised so that families and, businesses are not dispersed and scattered throughout other parts of London.
Councillor Williams, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much to the deputation for coming this evening, but also thank you for all of your hard work and engagement over the past weeks, months and indeed years to make sure that as the redevelopment of the Elephant and Castle continues apace, that it works for existing residents and existing businesses. And I'd like to pay tribute to the contribution, energy and vibrancy that the Latin American community has brought to the Elephant and Castle. It's largely down to your hard work and perseverance that the area is as successful as it is at the moment, and we want to make sure that the regeneration and investment that comes into the area doesn't force you out of the area, but in fact creates new opportunities for your businesses to go from strength to strength, to employ more local residents, to make more money, to be more successful, and to continue to be at the heart of the community at the Elephant and Castle. And in the new Southwark plan, which is later on our agenda, in the area vision that we're going to agree for the Elephant and Castle, there's explicit reference to the Latin American community and that we want to see you continue in the area. In answer to your very four specific questions, before I answer those, I'd just like to say that obviously this is a live planning application. We're currently considering it very carefully. I'd like to thank you for the deputation in May. Following that, we've got significant progress from Delancey and a much better offer and a much clearer offer, I hope. And when those planning committee papers are published, there'll be much more detail on what the offer is going to be. But as you know, I think you copied into the email earlier from Patria from Latin Elephant that we're going to meet at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, bright and early to start next week, to talk through the 17 points and 17 concerns that you raised earlier today to try and get as many answers as possible before we do get to planning committee. But in answer to your questions, so the arches on Elephant Road, they belong to Network Rail, not to the council, as you may be aware. Every single meeting I have with Network Rail, whether it's about the Elephant or Peckham or somewhere else in the borough, I raise Elephant Road, I raise those arches, and we have made it crystal clear to them every time we've met that they have to work with the traders, with those businesses, renovate some of the arches, move the traders down to the arches that have been renovated to keep those businesses on Elephant Road so those businesses don't have to move. Unfortunately, the government is selling all of the Network Rail commercial portfolio, which includes all of those arches. We don't know who's going to buy them, but whoever does buy them will be making the same points to them and making it absolutely clear that the local businesses have to be respected. In terms of temporary relocation, hopefully we can give you some clarity now. We understand the importance of clustering, which is why the option for the new retail arcade in the Perinet House garages overlooking the Elephant and Castle is a key part of that. There are also the affordable retail spaces being delivered on Delancey's first phase underneath the student accommodation, which is completing as we speak. And there are also affordable retail spaces in the Lend-Lease scheme that are being built at the moment. And one of the recommendations from the Cabinet report in May was that we have a single point of contact and a single list so that they can be offered to local traders affected by the shopping centre redevelopment, so that you get first option on those units. In terms of return for businesses, if this does get consent when it gets to planning committee, it will take about 5 or 6 years to build it out. And at the moment, we're looking at about 10% of the retail space on the LCC site will be affordable, 5% on the shopping centre site, and that will be the option for traders to return will absolutely be there. And also as well making sure that those rents are discounted. The current model is that they're discounted for 5 years and then they step up to full market rate, and with the business support that we're putting in place, the aim is, and with the increased trade, increased footfall, to get the businesses profitable so you can pay market rate, because ultimately it's a trade-off between lower rents for businesses and securing affordable housing, and we need to make sure that we get the right balance there. But I look forward to meeting you on Monday to talk about this in much more detail. Again, I'd like to thank you for coming and for all of the work which members here may not have seen, but it has been a huge amount that you've put in over the past months and years, and look forward to continue working with you.
Councillor Williams, you indicated you wanted to ask a question early on. Is that still the case, or shall I move on? Move on, okay. I'm glad you said that. Now, the next one is Councillor Linforth Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Muchísimas gracias por haber venido esta noche a presentar esta deputación tan importante. I'm just thanking them in Spanish for coming here. So, there's nothing occult in here. Which is the prime importance for you? Is it to have a Latin quota or to remain as one in a cluster? What is the most important thing for you?
We ideally would like to remain as a cluster. The businesses around the Elephant and Castle go back, in the shopping centre, go back around 20 years. It's a very, very long time, Councillor. Many businesses, as they have grown in size, they have as a result, as they have grown and attracted more people into the shopping centre, other businesses have gravitated towards the area and more businesses are growing as a result. Not only that, Councillor, but other businesses are actually opening as we speak right now. So the Latin American community is actually keep growing and growing and growing in the Elephant and Castle area. So we would like to be, and we would like to remain clustered as a unit as we have been for the last 2 decades in the Elephant and Castle area.
Supplementary, please, Mr. Mayor. No? Oh, thank you. Muchas gracias.
Councillor Leary, you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming. And I know I met with you and some of your colleagues this morning to talk about some of the concerns that you had. And I obviously followed those up with Councillor Williams, and I'm glad that you're meeting him on Monday morning to talk the concerns through. One of the things that we talked about this morning was the importance of communication between the council and Delancey and the people within the shopping centre. And I guess I wanted to find out from you what more you think that the council and developers could be doing to offer the support and reassurance that you need and that you want around the future of the businesses in the shopping centre.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. One of the points that we raise and we have been raising is, as a traders, we want to be involved in the negotiations that the council is doing with the Delancey in this case. We are feeling that we are being set out of these negotiations. We are not even giving just lately some 4 pages of a relocation strategy, which is very vague, and we are not having any participation on it. So that's the main thing for us, to be participating in every single negotiation. We have given you the trust and the confidence, and we still believe in you, that you are supporting us and you are talking on our behalf. Thanks.
Right, is that it? Thank you very much. Go on, very quickly. Go on.
Williams and for Councillor Maria Linford. Can I hand them?
You certainly can, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you'd like to... Can I thank you very much for coming? Good show. Thank you. One of the officers will escort you. The next deputation is from the Dulwich Hamlet Football Club, and whilst we're on, I think there's some news you must know that Chelsea are a goal up against Swansea. Well, as it's a football theme, we don't know. Hey? Yeah, Arsenal 3-0 up, but there you go. Who cares? No, 4-0 up now. Sorry about this. Too much frivolity, isn't there, really? Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. As usual, you have 5 minutes to speak, and that time starts round about now. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Alex Crane, the chair of the Supporters Trust at Dulwich Hamlet Football Club. The pictures you see here represent the essence of what our club is about. From the amateur team, winning teams of the 1930 to Gavin Rose's championship winning team of 4 years ago. Building friendships with other clubs and their fans, supporting good causes and fostering an environment at the club make it inclusive for all. With me here are Liam Hickey, who is the chair of the football committee, Rav Anand, who is also on the committee and our club secretary, and finally Gavin Rose, our first team manager and the inspiration and driving force behind the Aspire Academy. I'd like to invite Gavin to address you first.
Thank you, Alex. This is an amazing time for Dulwich Hamlet Football Club. The support we are enjoying today is higher than it has been for over 50 years. Average crowds of more than 1,500 this season are 9 times what they have been when I first started 8 years ago. Our Aspire Academy works with hundreds of young people every year. 35 players from the academy have moved into professional football. But Aspire is not just about success on the field. It's not just about developing better players. Aspire also tries to instill into our young people the importance of becoming better members of the local community. It also helps some players adjust to the fact that football might not be able to provide for them in the long term. We are proud of the many young people from Aspire who may have been lost to football, but have not been lost to society. Whilst most things are going well at the club, it is facing a very real threat to its existence. That is why we are here tonight. We are asking you to support the motion today from Councillors Catherine Rose and Sarah King. Catherine and I are not related, by the way. The motion describes what the council will do to help the club and to secure its future. We are very grateful that it has been brought forward, and we hope that everyone here tonight will support it. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Gavin. Next year, for those who don't know, we celebrate our 125th anniversary. I think that makes us one of Southwark's oldest small businesses. The team started in Dulwich Village in 1893, but we settled in the Champion Hill area just a few years ago, around 1902. I think we've been there ever since. I think that's as long as Chelsea have been at Stamford Bridge, Mr. Mayor. The team has a long history, a strong and proud heritage, and obviously its unique colours. 4 times Amateur Cup winners, 2 Hamlet players, Edgar Cale and Bert Coleman, earned full England caps whilst playing for the Hamlet. And in 1948, Champion Hill was used for the London Olympics, hosting football, just as the Herne Hill Velodrome hosted cycling. You may have heard about the positive impact the club's had in supporting good causes. If you haven't, where have you been? What I think is often overlooked is that actually we have a great benefit to the economic and social value of the club, to its supporters and what they bring to local businesses. You can't go down Lordship Lane on a Saturday afternoon without seeing a pink and blue scarf. So that's all part of our great merchandising, a collaboration between the club and our supporters trust to ensure our colours are very prominent in Dulwich. And the economic part of it and the support of local businesses is one of my main areas of interest. We have business sponsors and partners who back the club financially. They put up posters, display our scarves, and it's all because of the positive image the team has in the local community and the benefit our supporters bring to their businesses. We have a strong community identity. We're a family club, brought pleasure and pain to generations of supporters. It's very often the first club children went to, local, family-friendly, a community feel. Our fans live locally, most of them. We're very proud of the way we've grown to become a big part of the community, and we want to keep it that way.
Everyone, councillors, MPs, GLA members and the mayor of this great city have said that clubs like ours, and especially this club, should be supported. You can support us in this room tonight. We ask the council to continue to argue for our best interest, to support suitable proposals to improve our stadium, to help us to ensure that our fans are at the heart of the club's future and that the club remains at the heart of the community. The very existence of this club is under threat. This at a time when the club has become more important to Southwark residents than at any time in the last 50 years or more. We thank you for your support so far and ask you to support the motion this evening. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Well, would you like to ask a question of the leader or the relevant cabinet member?
We'd like to ask the leader, how will he continue to offer his support and that of the Council in keeping the club going up to, and what we all very much hope for a long time beyond our 125th anniversary.
Well, can I thank you for bringing your deputation this evening? Can I congratulate you on your magnificent performance this season and previous seasons? I'm very proud to be a councillor for the Dulwich Hamlet Football Club and have been since 2002, so it's been a particular interest of mine over that time. What I can say that we will do is that we will continue as a council to be advocates on your behalf. I have, up to now, sometimes I've almost got into serious trouble because of it. Maybe I will get into serious trouble again. But I continue to be advocates for you. What I don't want to see, and what nobody in this chamber wants to see, is Dulwich Hamlet Football Club to suffer because of a property transaction. I think the history of the club over the last 30 years probably has been that the club has suffered through various property transactions, and that cannot continue. As you pointed out, this club is about its fans, its supporters, its great performances on the pitch, but the atmosphere that it creates and the goodwill that it generates, not just within Southwark, but much wider. You represent, I believe, and as the Mayor of London has said, all that is good about football and particularly non-league football. So we're going to continue to be on your side. We will advocate for you with the current stadium owners. We will see whatever we can do, and I remain fully committed to ensure that the football club remains on the site, not just into 2018, but for another 125 years beyond.
Thank you. Once again, we have 5 minutes for members to ask questions. I've got Johnson Sit who wants to ask the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming along today. As many people in the room, I've been at many a community event where the players have been there giving out awards or donating signed shirts or signed football. So thank you for everything you do, and indeed good luck for the rest of the season as well. I just wanted you alluded to this in terms of your comments earlier. I just wanted to ask if you wanted to provide any more information about the benefits that the club provides to local businesses.
Well, I mean, it's in terms of, you can measure impact sometimes by the businesses who want to be involved with you, and certainly in the hospitality industry, I would say that we're very, very important to Dulwich on a Saturday afternoon. And that's shown by the increasing number of sponsors from restaurants, pubs and bars who are trying to attract the very people who attend Dulwich, which is young with disposable income, but equally family related in terms of some of our sponsors. So we're very keen to be involved with those type of businesses. I think we've also made a bit of a statement this year by having a sponsor who are very ethical in terms of our major sponsor. So we have seen the way that our club, and we think our sponsors start to fit our club a lot better now, and that's how we'd like to keep it, making sure that they are ethical and that they in turn are good citizens of the borough as well.
Thank you. Councillor King?
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for coming along tonight and giving your deputation, but also I was particularly keen to thank you for the way in which you've continued communication with all of your ward councillors and obviously with the leader and the cabinet member to make sure that we're up to speed what's going on. Now, I might be giving away a little bit that my knowledge of football isn't fantastic, so I thought I would ask a question about all of the good causes and community work that you are doing locally, and if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Each year the club takes on kind of official charity partners, and in the past 2 years we have partnered with the likes of the Coppleston Centre, Football Beyond Borders, and this year Lambeth and Southwark Mind. That's not something that we do to try and get plaudits for, it's just we feel it's the right thing to do. Alongside that, each year we carry out a number of collections and awareness raising events throughout the season. So whether that be collections for Grenfell Tower, other local teams players who've suffered unfortunate injuries, the British Legion every single season, the Mayor of Southwark's charities, and then beyond that, Gavin will testify to this, but in terms of actually doing that, going that step further and actually getting our team to play on the pitch in aid of charity, so whether that be in aid of the Sierra Leone mudslide victims, the groundbreaking match against Stonewall FC, the world gay champions at the time, and also against the Syrian refugee team FC Assyria. So I think in the past 5 years we've done that because we feel it's the right thing to do. We've rightly, you might say, got a lot of good press out of it, but we don't do it for the press, we do it because we think it's the right thing to do. The press is a byproduct of that, but I think it's what makes us a club that cares about its community and is fully integrated with its community.
Thank you. Councillor Crine, you've got about just over a minute.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I actually used to go and watch Dulwich Hamlet when I was a child in the 70s, so it's really nice to see that the crowds have improved quite a lot since then, because they really weren't 1,500. I know that one of the options you're looking at is maybe the option of having fan ownership for the club, and I just wondered, could you tell us a little bit about the benefits of that and implications, and also, do you think it would be better to have fans owning the club?
Yeah. So one of the Supporters Trust's main objectives is to become a fan-owned club, and that is essentially about putting the care and control of the club into those who care the most, the fans. We've had a succession of sole owners and people who care little for the future of the club and for its existence. Really, they've got a different agenda. The fans aren't in it for a quick buck. We're here for the long term, and we feel that fan ownership would enable us to give the club a good ground to continue the great work that we've done on and off the field, but also just give us the control that at the moment we're sadly lacking a bit because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in.
Well, I'd like to thank the deputation for coming tonight, for some really good questions. I'd like the officer to come and escort you. You can stay if you like. Just to let you know, Chelsea is still a goal up with 4 minutes to go. Right, we move on to issues raised by members. This is members' questions, and the first one we will now consider a late question from Councillor Al Samurai. Do you have a supplemental question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, my question was about moped crime, and I don't know about other members, but I have been really struck by the increase in contact from residents, really quite anxious. There was a horrible attack in my ward just 2 weeks ago at the Riverside Parents Association, where a mum was
And it'd be nice to get a question, thank you.
I'm just trying to set the context about why it was an urgent question, because I think certainly obviously crime is a problem that we face regularly in the borough, but there is clearly something going on at the moment. I was it's a shame we won't get to debate the motion that we put forward this evening, and I was disappointed in Labour's amendment, which, as ever, really blamed the government.
Councillor, can I please say a
Mr.
question,
Mayor,
please?
Sometimes it's helpful to set the context.
You've got time to speak to you, don't worry, come on.
So I was a bit disappointed in Labour's amendment, which kind of blamed the government for the decision the Mayor is making about police front counters. And I just wondered whether the leader has, possibly privately, if that's more comfortable for him than publicly, but made representations to the Mayor about our front counters in Southwark and the importance of those.
I want to thank Councillor Samurai for her supplementary question. I think we have to recognise that the Met Police, in line with many other public services, is having to find huge sums of money, £400 million, I think, in the current spending round, in savings. And the tough decisions are having to be taken by the Mayor and MOPAC, that those savings will come from things like front counters, in order that we can keep more police on the beat. Because I know that actually if you put to the test, what are people's priorities? Is it having a physical front counter, or is it having police on the beat? It will always be police on the beat because of the deterrent effect that they have. So I think we have to acknowledge that. Of course, we have inputted into consultations that have taken place about where front counters should be, how the proposed joining of Lambeth and Southwark forces should be affected. I'm pleased that our borough commander is likely to be the borough commander across the two boroughs. He knows Southwark well now, having been here for 18 months. And just on the point of moped crime, I do want to reiterate my answer to her. It is a great concern. That's why when I met with the borough commander on Monday, it was the first thing I raised with him as a concern, because it's apparent, and particularly certainly over the summer months, it was obvious that things were going on, and you did feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes on the streets, even around here, because of mopeds and young people on mopeds zipping around. He did tell me that he's emphasising the work of the robbery squad in Southwark, that several arrests had been made in relation to moped crime, and he was hoping and confident that we would see a downturn in the numbers of reported crimes as a consequence. So I think it's important for members to take the message away that we've fed into the system. All of us have raised our concerns about moped crime. It has been taken seriously, it is being acted upon, and it only can be acted upon if we've got police on the streets rather than those front counters. So I suppose my answer is yes, of course, we always argue to keep front counters in Southwark. That's been our starting point. But I think we have to all acknowledge that in a time when 400 million needs to be saved, what's the priority, police on the beat or front counter? It has to be police on the beat.
Thank you. Do you have a second supplemental question?
It's funny, isn't it, the difference between the campaign about front counters when it's a Labour mayor versus previous mayors and your response there. But anyway, both the answer from the Cabinet member about moped crime and your answer doesn't talk about any of the kind of carrot element of dealing with this problem. It kind of talks more about the stick. Obviously, youth services investing in some positive activities for young people might actually be quite a liberal way of trying to address some of these problems as well. What's the leader doing to invest and support our youth services in tackling these problems?
Okay. Well, Councillor Hargrove is saying that it will be answered later in a question, but I think the point is that we haven't discontinued investment in our youth services. There is investment going into our youth services, and youth services which are actually getting more young people. We just heard, for instance, about the project that Dulwich Hamlet Football Club run, Aspire, in order to get young people involved with activity. So, there is activity going on. We had a great debate, didn't we, about this 18 months ago, about proposed reductions in youth service expenditure. And look, if I could stand here and say we're never going to cut anything and the world is perfect and our budgets will keep growing, that would be the much better world for all of us, I know, and we could invest it into this, that and the other. But again, the reality is, as a council, by the end of this decade, we'll have taken 63% out of the money that government pays into us in terms of cuts over that 10-year period. That's enormous. And so I think the fact that we do have youth services, and effective youth services, because I think everyone would agree that they remain effective, has to be applauded in the context of the cuts that we faced.
Thank you. Now we move to consider members' questions. We only have 30 minutes for questions, so members should ensure that their supplemental questions, if they actually ask one, are genuine questions rather than speeches. So the first person I will call on is Councillor Jane Lyons.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Leader. Thank you very much for the answer to my question. I did indeed ask a similar question about a year ago, but numbers weren't available, figures weren't available, because they were forecast and they weren't actually there. So thank you for responding regarding the level of savings, which seem, I must say, reasonably low for a borough-wide saving initiative, given that that removes 15 opportunities for engagement of local democracy and decision-making. My question is that you've very kindly outlined the other objectives of the change in structure and everything else. Is there any evidence that that is engaging or working better, given that there are now some budget savings? Is there actually working? Thank you.
I want to thank Councillor Lyons for her supplemental question. Well, I hope that her own experience in Dulwich will tell her whether it's working or not. I think actually the way in which community council meetings operate now, certainly my own experience in Camberwell, is that they are far more engaging. Actually, you have an issue which is debated and discussed. I know that there's incredibly effective session on knife crime, as a for instance, in Camberwell just a couple of months ago, and kind of freed from the shackles of a very strict agenda, gives everyone the opportunity to have a much more wide-ranging conversation. I mean, all the reports that I ever hear, Councillor Lyons, about community council meetings in Dulwich, they are lively affairs, brilliantly chaired and well attended, and I'm sure that must be the case. My understanding is that things are working well. Obviously, it's something we always keep under review. The objective of removing the very strict agenda was so that there could be far more of a dialogue between us as the politicians and the public we represent. If there are things that we can do to improve that, we will always look at it. But I hope that you have seen an improvement and perhaps enjoy the freer way in which they're currently managed. Maybe not. I don't know.
Councillor Bill Williams, do you have a supplemental for the leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. Thank you for a full reply. Does the leader agree with me that local residents and community groups, and within that, especially broadband SE16, local councillors and former GLA member Val Shawcross deserve thanks for their hard work and commitment to improving broadband in Rotherhithe?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I do, absolutely, surprisingly. I played my own small part in raising this as an issue at City Hall over the years. So, I think we all deserve a hearty pat on the back. The important bit about your question, obviously, and the answer in there, is that there is good news being rolled out, and the sooner the better. And what I think is so important about the approach that Councillor Colley has taken to solving this problem is that we have a short, medium and long-term solution, which I hope will ensure that the residents of Rotherhithe, like the other residents of our borough, will be able to enjoy The Crown on Netflix in due course, and will be able to join Councillor Johnson in their appreciation of the recreation of Her Majesty's life during the 1950s with other members of the royal family. It sounds like it's going to be an exciting series, and I know the residents of Rotherhithe want to watch it.
Yes, before the royal wedding.
Councillor O'Brien, do you have a supplemental question?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the Leader for his response. Could the Leader address the element to my question regarding the claim that apparently there will be no less than 1,000 homes that would have to be demolished for the construction of the Bricklayers station?
Well, thank you very much, Councillor O'Brien, for that helpful supplemental question. I can't verify that figure, but then I haven't seen the figures maybe that Neil Coyle has seen. What I think this emphasises is that the Labour Party is a broad church. We have independent views, and it's very right that our local MP is a champion for an alternative view. That was always the case. That was always the case in the days when Sir Simon Hughes was the MP. He always had an alternative, an individual view, away from the crowd, and Neil Coyle is following that happy tradition.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Mitchell, do you have a supplemental?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do, and thank the Leader for his answer. But I'm afraid he's missed the point that the deputation would have made, which I'm sorry we're not hearing tonight. The month of December is vital for many shops. If you sell chocolate, books or wine, you can do up to 40% of your business in that month. Dulwich Village shops are independent. It's the only outlet that they have. They're single shops, these ones. And that means if your income's cut in half, we're going to lose jobs. That's why I wrote the Regeneration Department in early November. On the 7th of November, I got a reply that there was nothing on offer.
And could you ask a question?
I will, Mr. Mayor. When the floods hit Herne Hill in 2013, you came and visited and you bought £100,000. Will you now accept that this failure by Highways to schedule work around the key Christmas trading period means that jobs may be lost? And will you now authorise the Regeneration Department to engage, and if short-term solutions can't be found, the Council will be honour-bound to commit further resources later?
I want to thank Councillor Mitchell for his question and the very serious points that he raises. I visited yesterday, as I say in my answer, with Helen Hayes, and we did talk to some of the independent traders. I think it's right to acknowledge it's not just independent traders now in that part of the village, and you have Jigsaw and Fired Earth and Pizza Express, and some of the big chains have moved in there now. But I'm supremely conscious of the impact which this work is having on the independent traders in particular. That is why we moved to ensure that Conway's moved their pound from the site that it is. Oh, well, Councillor Lyons, I think there was widespread acknowledgement, and it was either Helen Hayes or, but I would accept there was local campaigning of which local councils played a part in order to move that pound so the parking's there available. We've tried to bring things forward so that the walkway will be open right down the I described it as the north side of the road, but as at the end of this week, which hopefully will ensure that people... And what I talked about yesterday with Helen and some of the traders is I think we need to make the point known widely, and hopefully people will tweet and Southwark News will report, that Dulwich Village is very much still open over this period, because I think there is a misconception that it's not open, you can't get in there, you avoid it, and therefore passing traffic is just passing around completely and avoiding the area. There is provision for independent traders to apply through the government scheme for reduction in their rates, and we'll do everything we can to support people there. I can't promise an open chequebook from the council, but we will look sympathetically as things progress. I'm hoping that traders will have a boom time. They will not be too adversely affected. It's important these works are carried out. I'm sorry that there have been delays. One of the delays was the reason people exercised their democratic right to call in the decision, so that delayed the start of the works. But we'll keep it under review. I'm incredibly sympathetic to the independent traders. We want those independent traders to keep going, and we will continue to have a dialogue about anything that we can do to help support them. But as I say, I think there's also, as I say, this communication point about letting the world know you can park there. There are parking spaces. There are numerous parking spaces yesterday, for instance, when I was down there, that people could have used to go and shop. And maybe people don't realise that. Maybe they think all the parking spaces have been lost while these works are undertaken. But he does have my sympathy and the traders have my support.
Councillor James Colwell, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had intended to ask the leader who might be replacing Jerry Scott when she leaves the council later this year, but as everyone knows, the leader has already announced that. So, Mr. Mayor, I've got what I came for.
In that case, then I'll turn to Councillor Al Samurai. Do you have a supplemental?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do. This issue about the two-day centres in Southwark has, I think it's widely admitted now, been a complete fiasco in terms of the decision-making, the building being up for auction with developers before any service users knew anything about it, and certainly decisions being made before any consultation had taken place. I just wonder whether the leader would admit that there are any lessons that he's learned from this.
Thank Councillor Samurai for her supplemental question. There are always lessons from everything that goes on in the council that we learn about processes and procedures, about making assumptions about what people know, or what we've been told that they know. And so things have been learned. Yes, so the simple answer to this question was yes, of course, things have been learned.
That's a quick to the point. Councillor Catherine Rose, do you have a supplemental?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to thank the leader for his written response. I think I admire its brevity and restraint. So further to that, can the leader expand on what would be the key message he would like to convey to Meadow Residential tonight? And does he agree that the most progressive gesture that Meadow Residential could now make would be to reinstate the payment of players' wages and associated management costs for the squad? The club can only maximise its revenue and improve its chances of survival and, crucially, possibly this season, get promotion ahead of its nearest rivals, the millionaire-owned and funded Billericay Town, by retaining our amazingly talented and resilient and loyal squad of players and the management. Will he work with me to forward the hamlet?
Well, I want to thank Councillor Rose for her supplemental and her great support for the club and for this issue. I think it is important, and the deputation made the point that sometimes the ownership of the club or the people who sit behind funding the club have not always had the club's long-term interests in mind. And I think it's disappointing when the club becomes a bit of a pawn used by those owners for any means, be they commercial or otherwise. So I would urge Meadow to continue funding the club. I think the best long-term solution for the club lies in what they seek, which is fan ownership. And that is something that I think we need to try and work towards. Because, given the gates that they have, given the support that they have, given the crowdfunding that effectively has been going on in the last few weeks, demonstrates that this is a club which can stand on its own 2 feet given the right circumstances. And so that's what we all need to work towards. I don't want anyone to throw their toys out of the pram as a consequence of any decisions, be they bad business decisions or otherwise, that they might have made. And I'd urge people to put the club at the forefront of the future of the stadium site.
Councillor Noakes, do you have a supplemental question for the Leader?
I do. Can I thank the Leader of the Council for his response? As the Leader has acknowledged, the decision to introduce a one-size-fits-all zero-tolerance policy in regards to fire safety is a decision of the Council, not the London Fire Brigade. In light of the unhappiness of residents in regards to the poor communication, enforcement and proportionality of this new approach, will he commit to holding a borough-wide consultation with Council residents on the new approach to demonstrate that this is a Council that listens and values the views of its residents?
I want to thank Councillor Noakes for his question. I have sympathy for the points that he raised, because, I know on the East Dulwich estate, for instance, we had the silly position where we were threatening to remove 4 paving slabs that an elderly lady had outside her front door, which were there to help her access and egress from her flat. But we're saying, under our zero-tolerance approach, they had to go. Well, that's what she understood the case to be. So I think there is an argument for some greater discretion. I think getting rid of plants, for instance, just seems silly, doesn't it? Because it's pretty, makes it nice, look nice. So I think it is something we do have to rethink. I'm sorry, Councillor Crime's probably going to kick me and Jerry Scott will probably be really grumpy with me for the first time. But I do think it's something we need to look at and be pragmatic, because at the end of the day, these are people's homes. We want people to feel comfortable in their homes. We don't want it to be bare and stark, and a bit of discretion would be a good thing. So let's see how we can do that. And I will ask Councillor Crime to take that away. She's heard what I said, to see what we can do. Because I think there's probably pretty cross-party support. Probably most councillors have had issues raised with them about this. And we know that the problem that we're trying to address here, the people who've really got hoarded stuff outside their front and on the balconies, which are impeding, and where people have put up little gates which do impede access and egress. But I think we need to be a bit more pragmatic than we probably are. So let's see what we can do to get this right.
Right, Councillor Easton. Councillor Easton, you have to be very quick now. A quick yes or no answer if you've got a supplementary.
How does the Leader think that the Chancellor's announcement about universal credit will affect Southwark residents? I don't think that's a yes or no, but have a go.
Was there more?
Sorry. You didn't hear that question.
I did hear it, of course I did, about universal credit. What I can say is that I'm pleased that the Chancellor has listened to the representations that Southwark has made on this issue. The leading work that we as a council with Peabody and Croydon did in the Safest Houses work, the report launched by Councillor Colley just about a month ago in Parliament. Is it a month ago? About a month ago. And I'm pleased that the Chancellor has responded, and I think it demonstrates absolutely the leading role that Southwark plays in national debates. What that report provided was evidence which the Chancellor could not ignore. So I'm really pleased with the fact that some of the changes we were saying, the 7-day delay in payments and some of these other matters, have been taken on board by the government. It shows what good local government campaigns can achieve. It shows what a Labour council in Southwark can achieve for our most vulnerable residents.
Good yes or no, wasn't it? Councillor Williams, do you have a supplementary to the Cabinet Member for Communities and Safety?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your full answer. Could the Cabinet Member expand on some of the valuable work that faith community groups do?
I'd like to thank Councillor Williams for his supplementary question. A week ago, Councillor Maisie Anderson and I attended an interfaith forum at Cambridge House, and it was part of the Southwark conversation, which is what we are rolling out right across the borough to speak to our residents, to hear what they think about our council and our borough. And at that meeting, we came away very inspired by the commitment of faith groups that attended and what they want to do and achieve in Southwark and for Southwark. I can give you a couple of examples of some really excellent faith groups that really do dramatic work. For example, UCKG, who are based down in Peckham, the work that they do in terms of campaigning work, counselling work. You know, for example, they have a brilliant campaign against young people and carrying knives recently. There's also, based in the Elephant and Castle area, the SPAC, Nation Foundation, the work they do, giving positive roles to young people, investing in businesses that young people have started. My predecessor, Councillor Michael Shichu, former Councillor Oyewole and Councillor Jamil Mohammed, I think they were the first people that came to my notice as using their role, and of course Councillor Martin Seaton as well, came using their role of working very closely with our faith communities. And our faith communities in Southwark are a real resource for our people in our borough. And I think it's beholden on us as a council to work closely with them and facilitate all the good work that they do as much as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. It's just focusing on moped crime again, I attended a meeting with the police a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that they emphasised was the need for more people to report crimes, no matter how minor, because that basically increases the support they can provide from a resources perspective in areas such as Surrey Docks, which actually has quite low policing levels because it's generally being considered a safe area. So my question is, can the council, or will the council be willing to consider informing residents through post and other forms of communication about the police's policy, which is basically to report as much as possible?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Whitehead for his follow-up question. As he well knows, in his area, there's a very active local residents really trying to get the message out of there to other residents about the importance of being vigilant, the importance of reporting crimes, and we really support that, and we work really closely with them by trying to inform them as much as possible. I think it goes without saying that residents who are victims of crime should report crime to the police. I think, we all know if you're a victim of a crime, there's a 999 number to call, and we would strongly emphasise that is really important. I think your leader spoke just now about the need to keep counters in the area. Well, I think the counter in Rotherhithe has long gone. I don't think that you're really pursuing that in the right way. What you really need to be doing, ensuring, is that there is a dedicated ward officer based in Rotherhithe. That's really where it's important that people of Rotherhithe campaign for, because those local police people can go up to them and report crime and keep in touch with them about what's happening. DWOs have real good assets in terms of seeking out where there's been moped thefts, talking to the community about where there's patterns of crime, and I think that that's really what we want to focus on, is to support the dedicated ward officers right across the borough, not least in Rotherhithe.
Thank you. The guillotine is about to fall, and I understand that a member wishes to move a motion for the extension of the guillotine. Who is that member?
It's me, Mr. Mayor. Would you mind me just saying a very, very quick word about why I would like to do it? Okay, when the whips met with the Mayor, yesterday, the day before yesterday, we talked in some detail about how important the 2 cross-party motions were to both of our groups. I would therefore like to propose a 30-minute extension on the guillotine so that we could at least take proposers and seconders for both of those motions.
To Mr. Mayor, absolutely agree with that and keen to support it. Can I also say the Tideway motion has a deputation of residents here who have been here for 3 hours, so I think it's really important that we have time to propose and second that motion as well.
The floor? Okay. Half an hour.
We need to vote on that.
Yes, who seconds this?
Seconding it.
Mr. Haber? Can we take a vote, please, on extension of half an hour? Anyone against?
2 against.
Okay. Oh, it's 2 against. Pubs ain't shut, are they? Yes, Mr. Barber. Can
Mr.
I
Mayor,
help you?
I request to suspend standing orders. The amendment D that I proposed, we've agreed with Labour to amend that amendment, and we need to agree that before the guillotine happens.
That's what I understand. Yes, yes. That's no problem, is it? Yes. That's right. Yes. Who seconded that? Yes, we all agree with that? Good, good. Let's move on then. How were we?
So the meeting will not finish at 10:30.
10:30 the meeting will then finish. So we were, who spoke last? Dan, wasn't it? So Eliza Mann now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, the Cabinet Member, for your response. But in your yes, I have a supplementary question. In your response, you stated the Council have installed 11 permanent noise meters that are independently operated to investigate all resident complaints within 24 hours. But my question is, could these noise meters be reviewed, as residents have complained about the noise pollution affecting their health and exacerbating their medical condition? Yet the ward councillors were told by the officers that the readings at time of complaint showed they were not harmful. But I visited the site when they complained of the noise, but for me it is indeed very harmful to the residents who are suffering ill health.
Yes, I'd like to thank Councillor Mann for her supplementary question, and I'd like to go away and come back to her with a response to that supplementary question, if she doesn't mind.
Councillor Burdish, do you have a supplemental question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do. I'd like to thank the Cabinet Member for his response and ask, what does a Green Flag Award mean for local residents and park users? And what does the award mean for all those who successfully work towards achieving the green flag?
Yes, I'd very much like to thank Councillor Burgess for her supplementary question. It takes me back a while, the first time I ever met Councillor Burgess before she was a councillor, and I went along to Brunswick Park at that time to meet the friends of Brunswick Park, and I was quite nervous about it. It was probably my first green flag ceremony, and I met Councillor Burgess, and she gave me a very warm welcome. I really felt welcome by the friends of Brunswick Park and Councillor Burgess. So very, very fond memory of that day when we raised the green flag, and I think that actually shows how much it lifts the local community to work towards a green flag and get that green flag award. because they're really vital to every green flag that we have, 28 green flags across our borough. We have at our communities and our friends groups, working and contributing towards them. And it's the same with our staff and our contractors. And I'd like to mention Quadrant here, who have really been excellent in and really taken up the reins of gaining green flags across our borough, and our parks teams. You know, we go along and we have those ceremonies where we raise the green flag, and everybody there is really, really moved about that and so proud of our green spaces. And it means that our local communities are really extremely proud of where we have our green flags. And so thank you very much for it.
Councillor Simmons, do you have a supplemental? Can I just say, Councillor Simmons hasn't been well lately, but it's good to see him here, and he's in good health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the Cabinet Member for his response. He correctly identifies the very important issue of government funding and how that impacts on the number of police in Southwark. Can he explain why he feels that DWOs are a real priority for our borough?
Yeah, these days it's so easy to think beyond the preventative, and we've a lot of the theme tonight about around health and that has been about prevention, not just tackling things. And the DWOs are really vital to the lifeblood of our community, to have the trust of local people. One of the things that always really breaks my heart when we have a knife crime incident, whether it be fatal or whether it's not fatal, is the amount of times that young people won't even say what caused this knife incident. And the only way that the police are going to overcome that, I think, is by working and having the trust in the community, having the trust of their parents as well, and having the trust of the other members of their family, so that people believe that policing is something that's being done for them and not to them.
Councillor Dale, do you have a supplementary?
No. No, I'm fine.
You don't? Good. Right, well done. Councillor Barber, is that the same for you?
Yep.
You don't have a supplementary?
No, I don't.
Well done. Oh, lively on it. Councillor Merrill, do you have a supplemental?
Do, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately.
There's always one, isn't there?
I just was wondering if the Cabinet Member could expand on why the youth and play activities are important and what the plans are for the future for it.
Yeah, I think it's really illustrates how much of it, as a council, that we have a commitment to young people and youth activities in our borough, the success of our play scheme in the summer, and that young people have a chance to enjoy themselves, but also to develop and grow during the school holidays. I remember when I was a child a long time ago, and you know, I think we just used to have nothing really to do, and we used to try and get up to things, not really bad things, but you know, we used to not really have a meaningful occupation of our time. And I'd like to use this opportunity to pay tribute to all those staff and all the parents and everybody that's committed to make sure that our young people, even when school's not around, have meaningful and enjoyable time during the summer holidays.
Councillor Dennis, do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thanks to the Cabinet Member for his answer. Could he comment on the importance of having a consistent message on healthy living, which encourages both an active lifestyle and a balanced diet?
Yeah, I don't think we always knew this, the importance of this, the importance of, you know, the holistic approach to health, not just having physical exercises and then, you know, abusing alcohol or abusing food. It's really important that people understand that to develop and to be healthy, it's important to have a good diet as well. And you know, our contract with Everyone Active means that there's lots of opportunities for that. It's Also, the third pillar of that is sleep. And I think if you have more exercise and you eat well, I think generally you sleep better. So it's a virtuous cycle. And I think that earlier on, Councillor Dow was mentioning Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. You know, I think that really, following on from the health theme, you know, this is how people get self-actualisation, by doing those things and following the right rules, and they can reach that pinnacle of the triangle that Councillor Dow so rightly pointed out earlier.
Councillor Hamvas, do you have a supplemental question?
Yes, I do, thank you. I believe that from what I gather from speaking to the officer yesterday, it's about 3 weeks until the changing rooms and playroom will be ready, which is really good news. And on Saturday there will be a football match. I believe my colleague, our very own Gavin Edwards, will be playing in this football match. But anyway, I do have a question, sorry. Could the Cabinet member say what he thinks these improvements will mean for current and future users of the park? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Hamvas for her supplementary question, and I only hope that Councillor Edwards doesn't end up being a one-man team on Saturday, and that we manage to get more players to join that team. It really means a lot for the people of the Peckham Rye area. They're going to have a state-of-the-art playground, children's playground, which is a further commitment of our Labour administration keeping its promises to have a quality children's playground in every neighbourhood in our borough.
Well, question time has now ended, and we shall move on to the next item. This is the Southwark's bid for the London Borough of Culture. Councillor Octavia Lamb is to move motion 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall try and be as quick as possible. I'm delighted to propose this motion to support Southwark's bid to be named London Borough of Culture, and even more delighted that it's welcomed across this chamber. Everyone in this room knows that Southwark is culturally unrivalled, that culture is diverse and vibrant. We know we have award-winning libraries, world-class theatres and community cultural groups, the length and breadth of the borough. We know we have a rich seam of culture running through our history, a strong pioneering spirit that has supported ambitious and creative ideas since before the Middle Ages. So why then do we need to bid for London Borough of Culture when we already have such an embarrassment of riches on our doorsteps? Well, for the same reasons as laid out in the cultural strategy. We need to make sure these riches are benefiting everyone in Southwark, and that all the riches, be they world-famous museums or a craftsman in a studio off the old Kent Road, are celebrated and, even more crucially, are working together and supporting each other. The spirit of people coming together lies at the heart of the London Borough of Culture bid, because we know that culture is a way of tackling social isolation, a way of improving health and well-being. It gets to the very root of tackling issues that affect so much of the borough's population, like obesity and loneliness. And at a time that we're so divided, let's take this opportunity to come together to improve each other's lives and take pride in where we live. And this isn't just about a year of celebration, though there can be little said against this idea. This is about putting Southwark in the spotlight, so that we need to fulfil these aims and ambitions for the borough for the long term. The legacy of being a London Borough of Culture means we will continue to ensure culture and support for culture is reaching into every corner of the borough. Now, as some of my colleagues know, and a fair few disapprove, I love a royal wedding. But it saddens me that this talented young American actress, newly arrived in our wonderful city, has to give up on her creative career in favour of something a little more financially stable. I hope she visits Southwark, where the creative industry is one of its fastest growing industries, and of course where we have an excellent array of filming locations. In all seriousness, the Borough of Culture bid provides us with an added opportunity to find ways to avoid an exodus of artists to further afield because studio space is overpriced or their creative industry wages cannot cover the cost of living. We cannot claim to be a cultural borough if we cannot support the doers and the makers as well as the audiences. I hope the London Borough of Culture may go some way to filling the void left by the UK's future ineligibility for the European Capital of Culture. And like the European Capital of Culture status, and of course we think of Liverpool's rejuvenation, it will forge new relationships and alliances across the borough and find new, creative and long-lasting ways of enriching everybody's lives. The novelist Michael Faber recently wrote about Charles Dickens. We've had Blake, Tennyson and now Dickens. Dickens was a Southwark pioneer, if ever there was one. Of course, Dickens valued morality with his relentless work to highlight the injustices of poverty. But what he really worshipped was merriment, the buzz of making other people happy, of making a moment glow, of dancing a jig for no particular reason. And this is the reason that after his long night of being visited by ghosts, Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol not only just becomes a better person on Christmas morning, but he becomes a joyful person. He sings, he dances, he makes others dance, play music and sing. He sees other people living life to the full and he decides to join them for the ride. And this is culture. It is for joy, it is for happiness. Culture is for everyone, and it is to share. So I move the motion and look forward to being able to announce Southwark being named London Borough of Culture.
Thank you for that. Can I call upon Councillor Damien O'Brien to second motion 1?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the interest of brevity, to move things along, I formally second the motion.
There we are. So there is one amendment to the motion, so therefore can I call upon Councillor Al Samurai to move Amendment B?
I'm moving this amendment because it's the opposition's job to support where appropriate and to challenge when necessary. I'm pleased to support the bid for the Borough of Culture. I believe that it's actually the residents of this borough who are our strength, and the contributions that they make to our communities are simply endless. Because culture isn't just about the arts, it's also about ways of life, how we eat, shop, gossip, laugh, play. Not just the big fancy stuff, but the little groups, the libraries, the choirs, the filmmakers, the hairdressers, the nail bars, the knitting clubs, the bakeries and the greasy spoons. But the unique culture we have in Southwark does give us a challenge of how to celebrate and protect it while being open to the change and innovation which makes London so special. It's a challenge which takes us to the heart of that now dirty word of regeneration. Why a dirty word? Well, partly I think because it's an inherent contradiction. Regeneration means to change and improve, but what if people already value what they have? I want improved health and housing, but I don't want that to mean being priced out of my neighbourhood. Regeneration under the Liberal Democrats meant a mixed community development, like Bermondsey Spa. 1/3 social rented, 1/3 intermediate, shared ownership, and 1/3 private, owner occupied. A mixed community where you don't even know which property is which. Organic-led community growth of businesses and markets. A new health centre, investment in adult education and training. But this model, Mr. Mayor, has been replaced with a model of 100% luxury flats and a forcing out of existing residents and businesses. The administration groan, they pretend it's not happening, but it is. 1 in 4 properties, new properties, it's absolutely about regeneration. 1 in 4 new homes are sold abroad. We've heard this evening from businesses on the Old Kent Road, from Latin American Quarter, about our culture and our heritage being wiped out. At a recent meeting with the council, I was told that the mechanics at the Elephant and Castle isn't the sort of business we want in our new town centre. A business that's been there for years, that employs majority BME
30
residents.
seconds.
What about the bingo hall that gives people a good night out? What, rents go up, where will we shop? Where will people go for that gossip at the hairdressers and the nail bar? 7 years of allowing developers whatever they want has created segregated communities. Exactly what we warned would happen. Labour are destroying special mixed communities and our culture. So I urge you to support the amendment so we can make a bid to celebrate our culture, but also protect the incredible culture and heritage we already have.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Adele Morris to second Amendment B?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I believe the agreement is that I formally second for expedience.
In that case, because the guillotine...
Yes. May I move that we proceed to vote on the motion?
Right. Yeah, we've already agreed that because the guillotine has fallen, we will go straight to vote on Amendment B. No, well, whatever. Whatever. Right. Are we going to vote on Amendment B?
Yes.
We are. I thought we were. That's why I said it. Can we vote on Amendment B? All those in favour? $14. Anyone against? So that's carried. Any abstentions? Please don't call across the chamber, thank you. Any abstentions?
They've abstained anyway, so
Well done.
it's carried then.
So Amendment B is carried. Therefore we vote on the substantive, excuse me, as amended. Those in favour of the substantive motion, please show.
Unanimous.
That looks unanimous to me. Thank you very much. Nobody against, is there? No? Well done. Right, motion 8.
Going to move and second on this one.
Yeah. Where are we? Councillor David Noakes to move updated motion 8. Sorry? Carry on, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gosh. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 50 to 60 years ago, the 1960s became the decade of the liberation movements in Western democracies, with Martin Luther King and the Black Civil Rights Movement, women's liberation and the second wave of feminism, and the birth of gay rights following the Stonewall riots. With this came the rise of the counterculture and the rebellion of young people against the establishment. In the UK, these forces were just as strong and resulted in 2 landmark pieces of legislation in 1967, the partial decriminalisation of male homosexuality and David Steele's private member's bill to legalise abortion. Of course, despite the significance of both these pieces of legislation, let me assure you that neither homosexuality nor abortion started in 1967, as our opponents sometimes suggest. Before I speak to the heart of this motion, I want to make it clear what this motion is not about. This motion is not about whether abortion should be legal or about the moral arguments for and against abortion. It is also not intended to question or denigrate the strongly held views of individual members may have about the right to life versus a woman's control of her own body. And to that end, I would urge all members' views that should be heard and respected. What this motion is about balancing the right to protest and freedom of expression with the right for women to obtain advice and a legal, safe abortion without intimidation and harassment. My first direct engagement on this issue goes back to December 2014, when I was invited to join a counter-demonstration by local residents outside the Blackfriars medical practice against the anti-abortion protesters who were protesting on a regular basis outside the BPAS clinic, which is run from the same building as the GP surgery. The reason for the counter-demonstration by local residents, some of whom were also patients at the GP practice, was the feeling that the displaying of emotional images, the wearing of body cameras, and the repeated attempts of the protesters to engage patients and women going into either the GP surgery or the BPAS clinic was unwanted and put undue pressure on those seeking medical advice or a legal abortion. In the early days, this included protesters entering the GP surgery and locating themselves outside the door of the building until they were required by the police to relocate themselves to the other side of the road. In late 2016, after 2 years of protests, residents and I met with the police and council officers to see what more could be done to protect patients and women accessing the GP and the BPAS clinic from the ongoing protests. But we were advised at the time by the council's community safety team that there was no further action the council could take. Nationally, MPs like Diane Abbott and Rupa Huq were taking up the issue with requests for new legislation to protect women being able to access the clinics. The game changer came this October when Ealing Council passed a motion which committed them to fully explore every possible option. Since then, other councils such as Portsmouth have followed suit. Powers that have been considered include introducing a bylaw or the use of public space protection orders. But whatever the preferred option, the powers should be evidence-based, legal and proportionate. As a Liberal, I have thought long and hard about introducing a motion that seeks to impose restrictions on the right to protest. But my conclusion is that in a free society, rights have to be balanced to ensure that one person's views or actions don't encroach on another person's rights and freedoms. To inform my thinking, I carried out an email poll of residents in my ward. Within 7 days, I received a total of 248 responses, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those Cathedrals Ward and Lambeth residents who responded, whether they were for or against the motion. Many of the responses I received were full of emotion, as one would expect on such a passionate issue, whether the responder was in favour or against the creation of a buffer zone. The results, however, were overwhelming, with 235 votes in favour of a buffer zone, 12 against, mainly on civil liberty grounds, and 1 who chose not to state their view. The often repeated view of residents, a significant minority of whom are also patients of the Blackfriars medical practice, was that the right of women to access advice and an abortion without harassment and intervention should take precedence over the rights of protesters to campaign against abortion. Buffer zones do not deny the right of protesters to protest, but rather their right to do so in a place that could disproportionately impact on those seeking access to the clinics. Many residents made the point that those opposed to abortion should target their campaigning at the decision makers, not the individuals.
30 seconds.
Mr Mayor, if colleagues vote this motion tonight, they will be instructing the Council to consult with interested parties, including Southwark residents, to investigate the appropriate legislation that could be used to introduce a buffer zone outside the BPAS clinic in Columbus Street or any other targeted clinics. Furthermore, the motion calls on the Council to support the campaign for new legislation to be introduced to legalise buffer zones outside abortion clinics. On this front, I hope the Government is finally listening, following the announcement by the Home Secretary on Sunday that she has ordered an in-depth assessment of protests outside abortion clinics. The review will gather evidence from police forces, healthcare providers and local authorities. And if colleagues pass this motion tonight, I hope it will provide the mandate for Southwark to provide a clear and informed response in favour of new legislation. I urge you to support this motion.
I call upon Councillor Rada Burgess to second updated motion 8.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm delighted to second this motion. No one who's walked past the Blackfriars Medical Centre can fail to have noticed the campaign that anti-abortion protesters have waged against women accessing its services over the last 3 years. Using video cameras, placards and photos of fetuses, anti-choice activists have sought to intimidate and verbally assault often vulnerable women making difficult health choices about their bodies. These protests are incredibly distressing to women who may not only be struggling with their personal choices, but also seeking to preserve medical confidentiality. Whether or not you agree with a woman's right to choose, which I personally believe is so vital to women's autonomy and equality, I hope that we can all agree that women must be free to exercise their right to access healthcare, free from intimidation and harassment. This motion on establishing buffer zones around our clinics will do much, not only to protect women patients, but also shield nurses, doctors and clinic support staff from harassment. We in Southwark Labour have been working to find a solution to the problem for a while, liaising with Neil Coyle MP, councillors in Lambeth and with charities like the British Pregnancy Advisory Service. We know that realistically there are two options for buffer zones: using existing local powers in the form of public space protection orders or primary legislation. As Councillor Noakes has rightly said, Labour MPs like Rupert Hook have been pushing for primary legislation, and the Home Office finally appears to be moving towards that possibility. While welcome, that will take too long for women who are really suffering as a consequence of the protests. We as a council have a pivotal role to play in stopping that distress as soon as possible. We were gratified to recently receive positive coverage in the Southwark News about the work Neil and I have been doing. I'm very pleased, if a little gutted he got there first, that Councillor Noakes has followed up with this motion.
30 seconds.
I'm intensely proud to support it. I urge you to vote in favour and help us show the citizens of Southwark that this council takes a clear stand in favour of buffer zones and against the intimidation of women accessing healthcare.
As part of the programme motion, members have agreed that the motion will be moved and seconded with no debate. So I shall now move to the vote on the substantive. No, right. So, those in favour of substantive motion 8, please show. That looks unanimous to me. Well done. Motion 4, Tideway. Councillor Hamish McCallum to move motion 4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to almost all of the members in this chamber for allowing this motion to be considered and debated. I also want to begin by recognising the fact that this has been, from pretty much the outset, a cross-party position held within Southwark, both while the plans were going through the planning stage and indeed subsequently over the last couple of years while Tideway have been on site at Chambers Wharf. I'd also like to pay particular thanks to both the Council Leader, Peter John, and the Chief Executive, Eleanor Kelly, for their personal interventions and personal involvement in this issue. I think it's important to recognise that has been the case throughout, and I, as a ward councillor, am grateful for that. I also note that Councillor John made some very supportive comments earlier in response to the residents who've been here this evening making their deputation. And while I'm grateful for those supportive comments, I hope that he and the Cabinet and the council officers here in Southwark recognise that what the residents are asking for, what the residents are demanding, is not just supportive comments but supportive action. The time has come, frankly, it's come and gone, if anything, for the council to really take necessary action and necessary measures to ensure that Tideway do operate in a way which is reasonable in an immensely built-up, densely populated residential community in the heart of our borough. Why is that? Well, as we've heard, this is this is an incredibly disruptive site. We knew from the planning stage that it was likely to be the most disruptive out of Tideway's 24 sites across London. They currently are working for 5 days a week until 10 p.m. We know that in a year or so they will begin working 24 hours a day for 3 years in an area with about 500 residents immediately adjoining a building site. I expect I'm probably the only person, because of where I live in this council chamber, that can say with some personal understanding the severity of the impact that has on a community. And the residents here have told you quite how impactful it has been for them, both in terms of the light pollution, the noise, the dust, but also, and particularly pertinent given the theme of today's meeting, on their health and their mental well-being. And that is important for this council to remember, especially considering the many important promises and pledges that have been made over the last few years about recognising the need to support the mental health and well-being of our residents. Going forward, I hope that the council will take upon itself the important role it has in holding Tideway to account. I do appreciate that there are a number of officers that have been working and continue to work on this project. from the council's perspective. But clearly, for whatever reason, that has not been enough to date. For whatever reason, problems are persisting. For whatever reason, there has been a dramatic escalation of impact over the last few months, to the point where residents are kept awake until 2 o'clock in the morning because of overrunning works. Yes, I appreciate that that is due to cement pouring, and I appreciate there are technical arguments and technical reasons for that, but at the end of the day, a huge amount of this is about choice. Choice on Tideway's part largely, but choice on the council's part as well. Choice as to the building construction methods. This is one of the most complex infrastructure projects that London has seen in many years. It is not beyond the wit of man, certainly not beyond the wit of the engineers working on this project, to be able to overcome those technical difficulties, to be able to operate that site in a way which is reasonable and respects the residents living around it. They've chosen not to, and I implore the council to choose to make to do the things which the council can do and could do in order to best protect the residents and best ensure that the community is alleviated from the impact of these incredibly intrusive works.
30 seconds.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given I'm conscious of time, I want to quote back to the council leader something he said a little earlier on in response to one of the members' questions. He said the council will always learn lessons about processes and procedures in everything it does. Well, I hope that Tideway will prove to be another opportunity for the council to learn and to improve and to benefit the residents both now and for future projects. Thank you.
Councillor Mann, are you able to formally second this? I'm just considering the time, that's all. Yeah. Sorry?
Thank you. Yes, up. Yes?
You.
Just a minute before the guillotine.
We've got 1 minute, you see, before the
They
guillotine.
want me to speak, Mr.
Go on
Mayor.
then, yeah. Go on.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Almost from the very beginning of the 7-year project, Tideway have viewed local residents as an annoyance and inconvenience to their work, rather than people who are having to put up with the substantial amount of disruption, noise, vibration of their homes, dust and poor air quality, and also asbestos. There has been a dreadful lack of engagement with the public throughout, with no warning or even apology when work has been carried out far beyond the agreed hours. These hours had already been extended to 10 p.m. over the wishes of residents, and the council has given in to every single request by Tideway to work until this extended limit. And still they have gone well past it, up until 2 o'clock in the morning at times. After the Labour leader of the council said that Thames Tideway would not even get a parking permit, the council has kept to its reputation of always giving in to developer demands of permits, holdings, extended hours, practically anything they want, it seems, rather than looking after
Councillor Mann, sorry, I have to interrupt you there.
Possible.
The guillotine has now fallen, and the remaining motions are therefore deemed to have been formally moved and seconded. So we'll now have to move to the vote on the motions and amendments. So, which one do we go to then? Vote on Amendment E. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, well done. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive. Motion 4, all those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous again. Councillor Helen Dennis to move motion 3. No, we're going to go straight on, aren't we? Motion 3. We're voting on Amendment D, I think. Yeah, Amendment D. All those in favour? Gordon, that makes sense. That's it. Then we go on to the substantive vote on motion 3. Yeah. 4? You sure? We're doing 3, aren't we? 3. Yeah, 3.
Local government pay cap.
Local government pay cap.
Local government pay cap.
Motion 3. Is it? Oh, well, someone's giving me the... Oh, well, I'm not going to blame anybody.
We had some...
Hold
we
on.
had some declarations for that one.
Ah.
We had some DPI, some declaration of interest.
There were some declarations of interest, weren't there, on the... yeah. So, what do we do on that then?
Yeah, but I don't vote. So, yeah.
That you don't vote if you've made a declaration. You remember that, don't you? Yeah. So we are voting then on... How far have we got? Motion 3? Good. Okay, we were saying 4. We ain't got to 4 yet.
No, we haven't got to 4.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Page...
We're doing them out of order.
Yeah, we're doing them slightly out of order. Can I do number 3, please? Oh, local government. Local government. Motion 3. All those in favour? 3. We'll do 4 in a minute. Don't worry. Thank you. That's unanimous, apart from 2 against. 2 against. Yeah. No. Yes, sir.
Me is seconding that motion.
Say it again.
No, it's formally moved. The guillotine has fallen.
It was formally moved and seconded, you see. Yeah.
And you recorded myself
That's the
as seconding
process.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we get to number 4, do we?
No, motion 2.
No, number 2. I do apologise. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Here we go. Motion 2. All those in favour of Amendment C.
Motion 2 is Southwark's response to moped crime.
That's the moped. Yeah. All those in favour? Anyone against? 2 against? Any abstentions? No. We vote on the substantive then. Motion 2. All those in favour? All those against? 2 against?
And the others 4.
And anyone not voting there? Right, okay.
If you want to read out what it is, motion 5.
Motion 5, support for Dulwich Hamlet Football Club.
Go to the voting.
Then we go straight to the vote, do we? Yeah. Here we go. Amendment D, that's Councillor Barbour, Councillor Schimmel. All those in favour of Amendment D, as amended, because it's amended and amended, yeah.
Unanimous.
Good, well done. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive. Motion 5, that is. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous. And Chelsea did win 1-0. Anyway. Motion 6, the Latin American community after Brexit. Agreed. That's substantive motion. Yep. All in favour of that? Good. All right. Where are we going now?
Motion 7.
Motion 7.
Motion 8.
Motion 7 is
International Holocaust.
International Holocaust. Yeah. Vote on the substantive. All those in favour? Agreed. Good show. What have we got now?
We're now to reports.
We've got reports now. Yes, of course we have. These are always very interesting, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm sorry.
You need to read this out.
What am I like? Eh? Right. Proposed amendment to the terms of reference for the local pension board and pensions advisory panel. No? I'll jump the gun. Don't go away. Hey.
Sorry.
Right. So I say it again, as the guillotine has fallen, we have up to 15 minutes to consider this report. The recommendations are formally moved and there are no amendments to the report. Do any members wish to speak to this item? Yes. Yes. Council. New Southwark plan, this is, yeah.
New Southwark plan. I'm not going to make a 50-minute speech in 5 parts with 3 sub-points and point. I would just like to say this is the final version of this plan. Thank you to everyone that's taken part in the consultation. Thank you to the officers that have run this and collated the thousands of consultation responses we've had. This is just to highlight for members from across the borough that there are some significant changes that we have made in addition to retaining our commitment to social rented housing. The main changes that have been made are we are giving protection to the Old Jamaica Road Industrial Estate, which doesn't currently have it. We are doing the same for the Goose Green Trading Estate, which doesn't currently have those protections. And we're also removing the site allocation for the Peckham multi-storey car park. So all of the great works happening in that location can continue into the future. And we have also listened to the Peckham and Southwark citizens and are requiring community land trust housing as part of the affordable housing offer for the Aylsham Centre site, which is likely to come forward during this planned period. I won't go through all 500 pages. I move the report and hope that everyone can support it, Mr. Mayor.
Therefore, we vote on the report. Oh, Councillor Morris wants to speak. I do beg your pardon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will be brief as well. I mean, obviously, we're happy for it to go out to consultation. We're aware that it's been through lots of processes. I think we're going to abstain on it, though, because we have a slight concern about the description of substantive amendments that's being delegated to officers and to yourself. I know that there's still people who don't feel that their comments about the tall buildings policy being expanded and some of the heritage policies. I mean, there were 2 people who wanted to make deputations tonight just on those. So we're just slightly concerned about what substantive means. But obviously, yeah, otherwise it's going forward for consultation to the next stage anyway.
I was saying we move to the vote on the report recommendation 6.1. Those in favour of the report recommendations? Anyone against? Abstentions?
12. So it's carried.
Thank you very much. That's carried. We move to Community Infrastructure Levy. As the guillotine has fallen, we have up to 15 minutes to consider this report. Do any members wish to speak on this item? We shall move to the vote if not.
One sentence, Mr. Mayor. The changes we're proposing here will raise more community infrastructure levy. We're changing the rate for the Old Kent Road, which will help raise £200 million towards the Bakerloo line extension.
So I'm asking that if you could vote for report recommendations 6.2. Those in favour of the report recommendations?
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Well done. That's carried. Constitutional changes, overview and scrutiny, procedure rules. Once again, we have up to 15 minutes to consider this report. If no member wishes to speak on this item, we shall move to the vote. Anyone want to speak to this? Right, then we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of this report recommendations? Agreed. Well done. Proposed amendment to the terms of reference for the Local Pension Board and Pensions Advisory Panel. Agreed on this? Yes? Good show. Well done. Oh, one more. Hold on. We've got Treasury Management mid-year update 217 to 218.
Yeah,
Councillor Fiona Colley would like to speak to this.
Thank you. I'm really sorry to be a killjoy because I know people want to go home, and actually what I'm going to say is a bit killjoy as well. We've heard tonight quite a lot of people wanting to make some very lovely capital commitments on contributing all of the capital for cycle hire expansion, to buy a football ground, which I'd love to do, and to pay for a bridge that's already fully funded, which I'm less keen on. But I did, for that reason, want to draw people's attention to recommendation 4 in the report. We've been through a time where on the capital programme we have been in a time of plenty with capital receipts, with grants for Section 106, where we have been fully funded on the capital programme. We are now estimating that we are going to have to start borrowing to fund the capital programme, and whilst our debt levels are low and interest rates are low, I do just want people and all members on all parties to be aware and to particularly note that we are not going to be in a position longer term that we can just keep on spending capital.
Recommendation 7.3, are we all in agreement? Therefore, I will bring this meeting to an end. But before we do, can I just wish you all a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year. I think we've had some good debates tonight. I would single out Councillor Noakes' contribution, which I thought was tremendous. I think we do great debate in this room, so well done, keep it up, and I'll see you in whenever it is. Thank you.